Chapter 984. When they were fighting Doomsday Assault earlier, Fong Bujue had already noticed that something was off about the enemy. After this awkward test, well, Brother Ju did not feel awkward at all. Brother Ju could basically confirm that at least the two members of Zombie Blade that he had encountered were playing the game while they had stopped taking drugs. Even though Brother Ju had no idea why, and he had no idea whether it had anything to do with his visit to Jiangdao that night, he knew that for Underworld Frontline, this was undoubtedly a great advantage. Compared to the normal performance in the game videos, the strength of the attacks is obviously above average, and the angle and timing of the attacks, there is a certain degree of deviation as well. Fong Bujue looked coldly at first as King, who was flying toward him. He thought to himself, with one look, it's obvious that he hasn't gotten used to the game when the drug has lost its effect. His control over his body is a mess, but he doesn't even realize it. While he was thinking, the man's blade arrived. I say, Captain Xian Yue. Brother Ju used a casual tone to chat with the man as he moved horizontally on the wall to evade the slash. Did you forget something before you came online today? What do you mean? When Xian Yue King spoke, he was already standing on the wall. Even though his first slash missed, he immediately spun the sword in his hand in a semicircle and smoothly followed up with another slash. Ping, ping, ping. Seeing that, Fong Bujue took half a step to the side and raised the military shovel with one arm. He faced his opponent from the side like he was playing fencing. He used the shovel to block his opponent's attacks and retreated as he fought. Oh, could it be that? Brother Ju paused and then continued with a smile. Until now, you still haven't realized that you're different from how you usually are? When that was said, Xian Yue King's expression shifted. Oh, you mean the power of the active skill is limited, right? Looks like he had misunderstood. You don't need to remind me. I noticed it a long time ago. As he said that, the sword in his hand moved even faster. If I'm not mistaken, the Doomsday Assault member that died not long ago was killed by you right here, right? I believe it was because he did not notice that in time that he fell into your trap. Before he finished, Fong Bujue was forced to the edge of the wall. Seeing that there was no place for him to land, Brother Ju flicked his wrist and used all his strength to push his opponent back and bought him half a step. Then, with a twist of his body, Fong Bujue landed on the empty ground outside the courtyard. You're not wrong about the cause of your teammate's death, but I am referring to something else. After Fong Bujue landed, he thought about it and took out a handgun from his inventory. Name, Stellar Cooling Cannon, as if, item type, weapon quality, excellent, attack, none element, none special effect, make your target calm down, contains 1 gallon of ammo. After it is used, it will recharge at a slow speed. It will take about 2 hours to recharge from empty to full. Equip requirement, Marksmanship D, Workmanship D. Note, regardless of appearance or function, this looks like a cheap toy water gun. Even though its water inlet is sealed, considering its self-recharging property, that does not seem to be a problem. After a chemical test, the ammo fired from this gun is just normal water, but for some reason, creatures that are hit by it will slow down for a certain period of time. The specific duration and effect of the slowdown depends on the size of the target. P.S. We have already fired the programmer who designed this item because he always gave exaggerated names to the items he designed. This handgun that looked very much like a child's toy was one of the prizes that Fong Bujue had received during the preliminary round. Random Excellent Weapon X2, Perfect Weapon X1. Naturally, he had tested the actual effect of this gun, and overall, it was not that powerful. The reason Brother Ju did not toss this thing into the disintegrator and carried it with him was because he was interested in the water production function of this gun. He felt that the gun's ability to produce a gallon of water every 2 hours might be used in some of the scenarios. And now, in this kind of hand-to-hand combat where no one relied on skills, this thing appeared to be quite useful. Since you haven't noticed, I'll get straight to the point. After he took out the gun, Fong Bujue continued, Captain Ju, do you feel like your expression and emotions have become richer today? Now that he had made things clear to this point, the other party finally came to a realization. Could it be? At that moment, the captain of Zombie Blade gasped internally. That's right. I knew something was wrong. The medicine seems to have lost its effect. With that in mind, he could not help but turn to Brother Jew. Wait a minute. How did he notice that? After several seconds of thinking, first Yi Wang figured it out. I get it now. Since I took the medicine at the same time as my teammates, it must have lost its effect at the same time. Therefore, Doomsday Assault, who fought Feng Bujua earlier, was probably in the same state as me. I believe Feng Bujua must have found some clues from Doomsday Assault and then used the act of singing to test me to confirm that the effect of the drug on my body has disappeared. While he was thinking about this, first Yi Wang chased after him from the top of the wall. Using the downward momentum, he swung his sword at Feng Bujua again. Humph! Captain Feng. While attacking, first Yi Wang did not forget to add, even though I have no idea why this is happening, in all fairness, isn't this perfect? As he spoke, he moved swiftly, and another round of attacks came. The blade rose into the air, and the blade was unusually sharp. Instantly, first Yi Wang was enveloped in a sea of blade aura. After Zombie Blade King left, even though Zombie Blade had not confirmed a new ace, in terms of ability, that person should be first Yi Wang. Regardless of whether he had the medicine or not, his ability was there for all to see. In terms of physical skill, first Yi Wang was one of the best. Oh, what do you mean by that? Feng Bujua dodged left and right as he retreated, but when he replied, his tone was as calm as ever. In that case, first Yi Wang scoffed. Even if you are defeated by me, you have nothing to say, right? Ha! Ha ha ha! Feng Bujua heard this and laughed wildly. Then he suddenly stopped laughing and said in a deep voice, "You think too much." The next second, there was a burst of sound, and Brother Jew fired. Yes, that was the sound a stellar cooling cannon made when it was fired. Boiling water? Here we go. It wasn't that Xian Yue wasn't prepared for it. When he saw his opponent take out a gun, he had already thought of a way to dodge. It was just that he didn't expect that the gun would shoot out water. It was different from the fleeting linear trajectory of a bullet. The trajectory of a water gun was continuous, and it would drag downwards. It was harder to avoid a single drop of water than to avoid a bullet. Oh no! When he was hit by the water spout, Wang panicked because he thought it was some kind of corrosive liquid, but 2 seconds later, he realized there was no pain coming from his body and his life points did not appear to have dropped. This is? However, he soon discovered the effect of the liquid. TSK. Slow down, is it? That's right, slow down. Feng Bujua fired with one hand and started his counterattack with a military shovel in the other. To take you down, this is more than enough. That's ridiculous. Seeing the counterattack, first Yi Wang did not panic. He immediately pulled back his sword and used a skill, Sword Slashing Mountain. Even though the power of the skill was greatly reduced, first Yi Wang's sword skill was still powerful and powerful. Even if it was the weakened version, it was still as powerful as a grade C skill. Is that ridiculous? When Brother Jew said that, he had already dodged the attack and appeared behind first Yi Wang. What? At that moment, first Yi Wang felt fear. His pupils contracted and his heart raced. He had not experienced this kind of feeling in the game for a long time. You still don't seem to understand your situation, Feng Bujua said. Do you think you'll be fine after you stop taking the medicine? As he spoke, he swung the military shovel at first Yi Wang's back. With a tearing sound, a long gash appeared on first Yi Wang's back. Even if you take painkillers regularly, there will be side effects and side effects. Brother Jew continued, and his attacks did not stop. The military shovel in his hand kept sweeping at his opponent, but he did not aim for the vitals. From the moment I saw you, I've been observing your movements. It's obvious that your perception of speed and time has changed. There's also the coordination of your body, the control of your explosive power, the control of your strength, and so on. These are all things that you need time to get used to. You won't be able to adjust to them in 1 or 2 scenarios. Damn it. First, Yi Wang tried his best to parry the attacks, but he felt powerless. His movements were either too fast or too slow, and the angle of his attacks was not accurate. He had been defending for a long time, and there were openings everywhere. That's why I said, When Feng Bujue used the cold weapon to cut at First Yuang, the water gun in his other hand shot at First Yuang. To deal with you, this is more than enough. Enough! First Yuang suddenly roared and stopped resisting. Are you trying to humiliate me in a match? If you want to kill me, then kill me. By then, he had realized that Feng Bujue could have killed him a long time ago, but the man purposely did not aim for the fatal spot. Humiliate you? Feng Bujue narrowed his eyes and chuckled. Ha! I think you've misunderstood me. 1, I don't plan to do that, and 2, I have no interest in doing that. I have my own reasons for keeping you alive. At this point, Brother Ju also stopped attacking. He studied First Yuang, who was covered in wounds, and then smiled. All right, with so many wounds, it should be enough. Now, he suddenly raised the gun and spat out the remaining water on First Yuang's body. Then he put away the 2 weapons, turned, and ran. As he ran, he said, "Take care of yourself." Seeing Brother Ju's back disappear into the distance, First Yuang was completely stunned. Well, what's going on? He did not understand why his opponent was running, but at that moment, he did not have the ability to chase after him to ask for clarification. So be it. No matter what he's up to, as long as I'm still alive, there's still a chance. Feng Bujue, I will make you regret this. First Yuang cursed internally. Then he sat down where he was and took out the life points recovery potion and bandage to stop the bleeding from his inventory. For someone who was used to playing games under the influence of drugs, this kind of pain that wasn't too exaggerated became very serious due to the contrast. He treated the wound while his whole body was trembling, and he was in so much pain that he broke out in a cold sweat. But even though he was in pain, he was still agile. In less than a minute, he had dealt with most of the bleeding points, but at that moment, a series of low groans came from the surrounding darkness, and they were slowly approaching. What is this? Monsters! First Yuang immediately stood up and looked around cautiously. At the same time, fear was slowly spreading through his heart. Chapter 985. To the west of Lotus Moon Town, there was a small mountain. The mountain was not big, and it was low. It looked like a mountain, but it was not a mountain. It looked like a slope, but it was not a slope. Since ancient times, it had been a nameless mountain. However, the temple on the mountain had a name, Lioha Temple. Today, there was no way to verify the exact date the temple was built. However, the 1,000 years theory was quite reliable. Whether it was the records from the outside world or the scriptures and ancient scrolls in the temple, they could all prove the long history of this temple. As a building that had existed for more than 1,000 years and was still being used by people, Lioha Temple had undoubtedly been renovated many times. Normally, the monks would spontaneously make small repairs. In terms of major repairs, there were records of 19 such repairs. The most recent one was 40 years ago. At that time, Lotus Moon Town was at its most stable and prosperous period. After a few decades of development and accumulation, the 3rd generation of the refugees had a good time. Although it was not that there was not a single poor person in the town, it was indeed impossible to find someone who lived on the streets and suffered from hunger and cold. As the saying goes, one knows etiquette when one has enough food and clothing, and one knows honor and disgrace when one has enough food and clothing. Since the townspeople of Lotus Moon Town already had a decent level of material civilization, they naturally had the leisure to build a spiritual civilization. At that time, the world of the scenario was basically similar to the feudal society of ancient China. It was impossible for the people to come up with a list of the 8 honors and 8 disgraces. Other than the traditional etiquette, the only thing they could talk about was religious superstition. Considering that the monks of Lioha Temple had been kind to the ancestors of the townspeople and the good weather in the town over the years, the townspeople decided to do something for the temple. First, it was to repay the kindness of the monks in the temple. Second, it was to thank the gods for their blessings over the years. Therefore, 40 years ago, under the negotiation of the mayor of Lotus Moon Town and the abbot of Lioha Temple, the townspeople raised a sum of money and prepared to use the money to completely renovate the temple and reconstruct the golden bodies of the many Buddha statues in the temple. This was supposed to be a good thing, but the ending was out of everyone's expectations. Renovating a temple as big as Lioha Temple was a very time-consuming project. It required a lot of craftsmen and labor. The manpower of Hiyu Town was obviously not enough. Fortunately, there was still some money left over for the project. Therefore, the foreman in charge of the project recruited many people from the surrounding villages and towns of Lotus Moon Town. That year, among the workers who came to repair the temple, there was a middle-aged stonemason who came from another village. This person's surname was Zhang, and his given name was Ku. Although his parents had given him a steady name, Zhang Ku's personality seemed to be the opposite of his name. Not only was he not very careful, he was also particularly irritable, frivolous, and meddlesome. One night 40 years ago, Zhang Ku drank a little too much at the tavern in town. With the help of alcohol, he suddenly had the idea of exploring the stone pagoda in the Lioha Temple. Speaking of the pagoda, it was indeed a rather mysterious place. Since ancient times, there had been an iron law in Lioha Temple. Except for the abbot himself, no one was allowed to enter the stone courtyard in the temple, let alone step into the pagoda in the stone courtyard. Before the renovation of the temple, the abbot had repeatedly warned the mayor not to let anyone near the stone courtyard. And the mayor actually conveyed the abbot's words to all the workers who participated in the renovation. To be honest, in the eyes of the workers, this matter was actually not a big deal. If it was a nunnery, if you said there was a forbidden area or something, people might be a little interested in prying. But if it was a forbidden area in a monk's temple, it was fine if they did not enter. Did you expect to find a cultivation magic weapon or a peerless secret book? But there was one person who was particularly curious, and that was Zhang Ku. This guy was a typical patient who had been diagnosed with a terminal illness for a long time. Moreover, he was the type of person who would lose his IQ and courage after drinking 2 bowls of yellow soup. The more you did not want him to go, the more he would want to go. After going there, he would come back and brag about it. It was also very good for him to be a hero in front of his peers. But we all know that true heroes, more or less, have some outstanding qualities and have strength. Some people, after drinking a few pounds of old wine, could still walk on the mountain road in the dark and kill a vicious national first-class protected animal with their bare hands. Some people, after drinking a few pounds of old wine, could also walk on the mountain road in the dark. But in the end, they slipped and fell to their death in the ravine. Judging from Zhang Ku's performance in the past decades, he definitely belonged to the latter. Therefore, when he left this time, no one could find him if he was alive, and his corpse if he was dead. Only a few people knew what had happened that night. Outsiders only knew that, after that night, no one had seen Zhang Ku's shadow again. A few days later, the mayor gave an explanation. Zhang Ku accidentally walked into the forest after being drunk and was eaten by wild animals. And this explanation, of course, did not satisfy Zhang Ku's family. They soon complained to the government. The first official of Lotus Moon Town was appointed by a messenger sent by the imperial court in the 15th year after the town was founded. The person who was appointed was the mayor at that time. Obviously, the imperial court did not pay much attention to the management of such a remote town. It was nothing more than a formality. The main purpose was to make the town officially belong to the government, so that it would be easier to collect taxes. After that, the town had a more formal government office. The law was also replaced by the original village law with the legal code issued by the imperial court. But in general, the town was still in a state of autonomy. Most of the officials were locals. After Zhang Ku's case, his family members were not stupid enough to come to Lotus Moon Town to complain. Therefore, they went directly to the higher-level yamen, and the government did send someone to investigate. The investigation process of this case could be said to be confusing to outsiders. Although there were many rumors in the streets, the content was different, and it was hard to tell whether it was true or false. The only thing that was certain was that the attitude of the officer who handled the case had been changing. At the beginning, he was determined to uphold justice and would not tolerate anyone. Then, his attitude became cold, and he was full of doubts. Finally, when he talked about the case, he was in a state of evasiveness and reticence. At the same time, The constables who were handling the case also intentionally or unintentionally said some strange and creepy words to the outside world. They roughly said, "There are some unclean things suppressed in the pagoda of the stone courtyard. Jean-Ke, this fellow, is courting death. I'm afraid his soul has already dissipated." In short, after a month, the case was finally closed. And the final result was the government came forward to mediate and asked the temple to give Jean-Ke's family a sum of money. Whether it was compensation or hush money, it was the end of the matter. Jean-Ke's family either chose to take the money and accept the statement that he was eaten by wild animals, or they did not have the money or the explanation. In that case, the family had no choice but to keep the peace, and the case came to an end. But at the time, no one would have thought that this case would set the stage for a disaster 40 years later. When he came to the door of Luha Temple, Wang Tanji lifted his head to look at the tall bronze door and mumbled softly, "It is indeed eerie." He spoke very softly, not because he was worried about being discovered by someone in the distance, but because he felt guilty. He instinctively lowered his voice. "I thought there was enough blood in town, but compared to this place, it is nothing." Xiao Ling, who stood next to Xiao Tan, covered her nose and grumbled. By then, it had been half an hour since the start of the scenario. Xiao Tan and Xiao Ling had met on their way to Luha Temple. Until they arrived, neither of them had noticed any signs of other players. With their sleuthing mastery, the possibility of them being followed was very low. If someone had arrived before them, there was an 80% chance that they would have been tracked down. Therefore, it could be concluded that they were the first two players to arrive at Luha Temple. Of course, they could not rule out the possibility that someone had been placed inside the temple once they entered the scenario. "How are we going to get in?" Xiao Tan stood before the door and thought for a few seconds before turning to ask, "Should we knock on the door or break in? Or jump over the wall?" Xiao Ling heard that and thought for a few seconds before silently taking 2 steps forward to grab the bronze door handle. Creak! She exerted a little force, and the huge door was pushed open. "Huh?" Xiao Tan was startled and asked, "How do you know it'll open with a push?" "I don't know." Xiao Ling shrugged. "I'm just giving it a try." Before she could finish her sentence, a cloud of blood mist rolled out from the door before she could finish her sentence. It quickly wrapped around Xiao Ling's entire body and dragged her into the door. 1 second later, Xiao Tan rushed forward instinctively to grab Xiao Ling's hand. But the cloud of blood fog had already dragged the latter into the door. Bang! When shock appeared on Xiao Tan's face, the door before his eyes slammed shut. Chapter 986. However, after the initial shock, it was not panic that appeared. Some people would crumble under extreme pressure, but others would awaken. When Xiao Ling was dragged through the door, Wang Tanji did not crumble. If anything, his terror points dropped rapidly, and his mind started to turn. 1 second later, he took 2 steps forward, grabbed the copper handle, and pushed. But the door did not budge. Something's not right. Xiao Tan immediately activated Eagle Eye to observe. It was fine if the door did not open, but once it did, he realized not only the door, the whole temple was shrouded in a ghost energy that was hard to see with the naked eye. Therefore, even if he chose to jump over the wall, he would not be able to get in. "So that's how it is," Xiao Tan mumbled. Theoretically speaking, this door should not be able to be pushed open. Xiao Ling was able to push it open because the thing behind the door did it on purpose. To put bluntly, this is a trap. With that in mind, he focused his mind, and in less than half a second his sorcery weapon Sai was already in his hand. Then, without saying a word, Wang Tanji swung his arm and slashed repeatedly. Relying on the weapon's special effect, Flame Devour, he managed to cut out a rectangular door on the door. As the thick door that had been cut off fell down, a thick stench of blood gushed out from the door. But at that moment, Xiao Tan did not care about that. His focus was fully focused on how to save Xiao Ling. This kind of discomfort on the level of smell could be ignored through sheer willpower. She must not have gone too far. Where is she? Xiao Tan did not hesitate to pass through the Temple of the Three Doors, also known as the Temple of the Mountain Gate. Normally, there were 3 doors that stood side by side, hence the name. In other words, the three doors referred to the door of emptiness, the door of formless, and the door of wishless. He was mumbling something. He maintained eagle eye and scanned the courtyard behind the door at high speed. Soon, he discovered the blood mist. As Xiao Ling was still struggling in the mist, the movement of the blood mist was greatly affected. Therefore, when Xiao Tin broke through the door, the blood mist moved to the incense burner in front of the hall. Chi! There was a sudden sound and a figure appeared. Wang Tongji took a step forward. His power was like lightning, and in the blink of an eye, he had already circled to the front of the blood mist. Stop! His frosty words and resolute gaze actually made the monster holding Xiao Ling unable to move for a moment. After a short confrontation, the blood mist dissipated. Then he saw an extremely beautiful woman appear in the fog. This woman was born with skin as smooth as jade, a face like a peach blossom, white teeth, bright eyes, and cherry red lips. There was a faint blush on her pale face, and her facial features were so exquisite that no one could pick out any flaws. She was dressed in red, like a bride who was about to be married. Even though the clothes did not show off her figure, her posture was still very slender, and her figure was very suitable for her. Yo, where did this little brother come from? You're really handsome. After the woman appeared, she grabbed Xiao Ling's neck with one hand and turned around. She used her beautiful eyes to look at Xiao Tan from head to toe. Dude, why are you looking for me? Wang Tongji looked at her coldly and was silent for a few seconds. Through eagle eye, Xiao Tan realized that this was a very strong monster. Due to the special effect of Shadow of the Nell, the effect of eagle eye had been raised to level S. It was at least at the level of a mini-boss. Therefore, in these few seconds, he was ready to fight with all his might. A few seconds later, he replied with 2 words, "Let her go." Huh. The woman smiled charmingly. Could it be that this girl is little brother's lover? Yes. Xiaoting gave another concise reply. At this moment, all the single people who were watching the live stream received a lot of real damage. I see. The woman tilted her head slightly and pretended to look at Xiao Ling. Take a closer look. This girl is quite beautiful and quite compatible with you. Haha. She smiled eerily. I wonder, if she doesn't have this face, will you still fall in love with her? Before she finished, there was a sudden change. The woman's cherry-like mouth split open in a second and expanded to an unimaginable size. Her face also became ugly and horrifying due to the expansion of her mouth. She did not look human at all. She opened her bloody mouth and bit down on Xiaoling's face. At this moment, Spirity was unable to effectively resist this attack. Because when Spirity was sucked into the blood mist, her status window showed that she had been inflicted with a debuff. Unless the opponent was willing to let her go, she would not be able to take out anything from her inventory, nor would she be able to use any skills. Furthermore, Xiaoling's close combat skills were not that good. In terms of brute force, she was definitely not a match for this boss-level monster. Therefore, she had no choice but to take the attack head-on. However, Wang Tongji would not let that happen. Even though the monster's attack was sudden and fast, Xiao Tan's reaction and movement were faster. Name: Soul of the Wolf. Speed, item type, other quality, perfect special effect. When this magic device is in your inventory, you will gain a special ability of the Soul of the Wolf. Remark: this item can be activated once every 10 minutes. Each activation consumes 300 stamina points. Within 3 seconds after activation, the user's speed will be tripled. This magic device was the second treasure that Xiao Tan obtained from Blackbeard's treasure. This meant that he gained an additional skill. This skill did not take up any skill bar and had a 100% success rate. Of course, since it was an item effect, this skill did not belong to any specialization and would not enjoy the buff from Shadow of the Nell. Whoosh! Suddenly, there was a strong wind. Wang Tongji's body blurred and turned into a shadow as he dashed towards the monster. Wherever the blade passed, the black flame was ignited. In an instant, the monster's head was split in half from middle. The upper and lower parts of her lips were completely separated. Seeing that half of her head had flown off, she naturally couldn't keep her mouth shut anymore. At the same time, Xiao Ling felt the pressure on her body lighten. This was no doubt a sign that the debuff had been removed. She immediately twisted her body and escaped from the monster's grip. Then, the monster's body fell to the ground. This was to be expected, because before its body fell, its soul was already gone. "Are you okay?" Xiao turned around and asked Xiao Ling with concern. "I'm fine," Xiao Ling answered and then continued with a frown. "But that was a mistake. One mistake, and I almost died at the monster's hands." "That's not your fault," Xiao Tan added, using the standard of survival mode. This scenario's difficulty should be a team's nightmare. That's why there was such a sudden death. He paused and glanced at the monster on the ground. "Don't be fooled by how easy it looked for me to kill her. Actually, she was very strong." When he said that, the monster's body slowly dissolved into blood and seeped into the cracks on the ground. "I know," Xiao Ling quickly added. "Be it strength, speed, or ability, this thing is already comparable to a big boss in a normal scenario." As she spoke, she seemed to have thought of something and muttered. And from her few lines and her performance, her personality is quite bad. In any case, we'll have to be more careful from now on." At that moment, Xiao Tan had unknowingly returned to his usual gentle, polite, and adorable self. His arrogant presence had disappeared like a puff of smoke. "Humph! You've become so arrogant just because you saved me once." Xiao Ling made a face at Xiao Tan. She stuck out her tongue and said, "Then you'll walk in front this time." Xiao Tan swallowed, and he did not hide the fear on his face. But I'm afraid of ghosts." "Huh?" Xiao Ling laughed drily. "Then, who do you think should lead the way?" This was not supposed to be a problem, but Xiao Tan really gave it some thought, and he really did come up with an idea. I've got it." Then he took out Dog Whistle from his inventory with glowing eyes and placed it in his mouth. Chapter 987. On the other hand, at the foot of Six Harmonies Temple, Captain, when Final Assault saw First also be king, he couldn't believe his eyes. This was because he had never seen First as king in such a state before. At that moment, the captain of Zombie Blade's first team had a pale face, and his eyes were unfocused. He was shuffling as he walked, and he was gasping for air. About 100 meters behind him, there was a group of ghosts that were floating behind him. "Phew, that's enough. Stop asking questions. Quick, use your medic skill to stop the bleeding. You have to stop it completely." When First his king arrived before his teammate, he gasped for air as he made this request. "Air. Okay." Even though Final Assault was confused, he still obeyed. Speaking of which, Final Assault could be considered a very unique player. All of his masteries were B grade. In other words, he was one of those rare balance players. He could be called on for anything in the team. He was not afraid of fighting head-on. He could take out a gun or two when it came arranged. He had a few sorcery skills and summon creatures, and he was always there when it came to healing the wounded. Even though he was not outstanding in any area, he was good at everything. Zombie Blade's photon processor listed his average ability, and he was one of the best. Therefore, he joined the first team. And at this critical juncture, the teammate that First Aid King wanted to meet the most was also the Final Assault. Such an all-around helper would be useful in any situation. "Okay, I've stopped all the bleeding." After all, he was a man with level B medic mastery. With the help of medic skills and items, it did not take long for Final Assault to stop all the bleeding points on First his king's body. There was not a single drop of blood left. But First his king groaned and turned back to look. He realized the group of ghosts had not stopped moving. "Damn it, is it too late already?" "What's wrong, Captain?" "Captain," Final Assault asked. "What's too late?" "Sigh, let's talk as we walk." First Yahweh King said as he shot a look in the direction of the mountain gate, indicating for his teammates to follow him. Then, he jogged over and said, "Doomsday is dead. You already know that, right?" "Yes." In less than 5 minutes after the scenario started, I saw a living person disappear from the team tab. Final Assault replied. First, Yue Wang shook his head and sighed before saying, "The apocalypse was killed by Feng Bujua." When Final Assault heard that, he immediately revealed an expression of understanding. It was as if once the name Fong Bujuik appeared in the sentence, many things that did not make sense became logical, and there was no need for explanation. Seeing that his teammates had accepted this setting, he continued, Fong Bujue, now, Fong Bujue's real identity is no longer secret. Many people know that he is a novelist, and his name is similar to his in-game name. After killing the apocalypse, he climbed to a high place and sang 18 bends in the mountain road. Final Assault turned around and said with a twist of his lips, Are you serious? Do you think I'm in the mood to joke with you? First, Yue Wang narrowed his eyes. Final Assault was silent. First, Yue Wang also had a pained expression on his face. Actually, before I heard the song, I heard the gunshots and recognized that they were Doomsday's weapons, so before Fong Bujua started singing, I was already moving toward that place. Unfortunately, when I arrived, Doomsday was already dead, so I got into a fight with Fong Bujua. You're actually still alive. Final Assault's words had clearly been blurted out without much thought. Hey, first, Yue Wang roared. What are you talking about? If we're going to die when we see him, then we should just admit defeat. No, that's not what I meant. Final Assault replied, rather awkwardly. I feel like something is off today. When first Yue Wang heard that, his expression shifted. Then, he immediately leaned over to whisper something into the man's ear. Oh, that's right. So that's what happened. Final Assault was enlightened after hearing what his captain had to say. I was wondering what was wrong. So it was, what is it? Seeing as the man was about to say something like drug, first, Yue Wang quickly cut him off. Think before you speak. After being reminded by his roar, Final Assault also realized his carelessness. Thinking about how he almost revealed the dark secrets of the gaming studio during the open competition, he was quite afraid. I'm sorry. He quickly apologized for his slip of the tongue. Never mind. Be more careful next time. First, Yue Wang did not blame him because Captain First. Yue Wang knew very well that this kind of situation where he blurted things out without thinking was undoubtedly caused by the drug. Long-term use of drugs that interfered with emotions and nerves would definitely have this kind of side effect. Since their brains had gotten used to the game state under the influence of the drug, their own inhibition mechanism had changed accordingly. Once the drug was stopped, the brain would need to spend some time to readjust this mechanism. And before the readjustment was completed, the words and expressions of the members of Zombie Blade were basically following their feelings. In any case, first he as King soon pulled the topic back and continued the previous topic. After the fight with Fong Bujue, I was injured to a certain degree, and then he escaped. Not bad, Captain. Final Assault said matter-of-factly. Since you were able to chase him away, he must have been more seriously injured than you were, right? First, Yue Wang looked embarrassed. No, then, why did he run away? At the same time, several hundred meters away, behind the group of ghosts. Very good. Finally, we have entered the temple. Fong Bujue had his hands in his pockets as he followed behind the group of ghosts, slowly moving toward the temple. Of course, he still consciously kept a certain distance from the monsters in front of him to avoid being affected by the blood corrosion aura of those monsters. When did you learn how to control the monsters in the scenario? Suddenly, a familiar voice came from behind Brother Ju. Fong Bujue did not need to turn around and know who it was. 1. He recognized Ruo Yu's voice. 2. There were not many people in the game who could sneak up behind him so quickly and silently. I can't control them, Yi Zichen said. The next second, Fong Bujue answered without turning around. I have merely grasped their movement patterns and made use of them. Sounds like these ghosts are no different from animals in your eyes, Ruo Yu said as she picked up her pace to walk next to Brother Ju. Fong Bujue did not answer that. He smiled at Ruo Yu and said, By the way, did you arrive just in time, or have you been lying in ambush for a long time? My teleportation coordinates are here, Ruo Yu replied. So, you've been lying in ambush for a long time? Brother Ju asked. Yes, Ruo Yu replied. But after waiting for a long time, it was Xiao Tan and Xiao Ling who showed up. Oh, Feng Bujue followed up with two questions. When did that happen? Didn't you interact with them? They came up the mountain about 6 or 7 minutes ago, Ruoyu replied. We waited in the dark and didn't make a sound. We wanted to see if they were being followed. But Brother Ju signaled for her to continue. In the end, the two from Zombie Blade showed up. Ruoyu continued. Then, why didn't you attack them? Feng Bujue asked. Because I soon saw a large group of monsters moving toward them, and among them, Ruoyu turned to look at Brother Ju and said in a low voice, You. She paused for 2 seconds before continuing. Since you followed them and didn't make a move, you must have a plan. With that in mind, I let them be. Ha! That's quite clever. Feng Bujue laughed. That's right. I kept the captain alive because I wanted to use him as a lab rat. In the past 20 minutes, he has already performed a comprehensive test on the animals before us. Let me explain it to you. Wait a minute. Ruoyu interrupted him. Before we get into these technical details, let's discuss the strategy first. She moved her eyes slightly and said, Other than the two that went up the mountain, Zombie Blade still has 2 more members. If you plan to go up the mountain, I think I should stay to ambush you. There's no need for that. Feng Bujue rejected Ruoyu's suggestion and explained, I killed the guy called Doomsday Assault at the start of the scenario, so, other than the 2 that came before, they only have 1 member left. He paused for half a second before continuing. Also, through the aerial view of the CG, I have roughly estimated the size of this Lotus Moon town. Combined with the information you provided, I speculate that the remaining man named No Mouth is King was most likely transported directly to the interior of Liyue Temple. Then, the other 10 to 20% is, Ruoyu asked. For example, Brother Ju listed with a smile. He was assigned by the system to the wasteland outside the town that is very far away from the temple. He died mysteriously when he was wandering around the map alone. He got lost when there was a clear marker. The mountain where Liyue Temple is located can be seen from all the open spaces in Lotus Moon Town. He thought it was not a good idea to go to Liyue Temple, so he went somewhere else. He finished all that in one breath and smiled. Adding all these hypotheses together, the probability is 10 to 20%. Ruoyu listened to this logical deduction and replied in a non-committal tone, Okay, I'll follow you up the mountain. Then she raised her eyes to look at the ghost before them. Continue with your explanation of their movements. On the other hand, at Liyue Temple, inside the Shanji kitchen, the kitchen of a temple of a certain size. At that moment, the last member of Zombie Blade's first team, No Mouth is King, was squatting in a corner, shivering as he looked at the scary scene before him. He saw a monster with a pig's head and a human body cooking on the stove. And the thing he was cooking was a pot of meat soup with unique ingredients. Chapter 988. Woof, 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 sharp, frequent, and cheerful dog barks rang out in the temple with an oppressive and terrifying atmosphere, giving rise to an indescribable sense of dissonance. This Chihuahua, even though the breed of the summon dog was random, the fact that it was a super small dog was probably due to the limitation of the skill, did not appear out of thin air. Instead, it was summoned by Xiao Tan using Summon, Puppy, as a very basic summoning skill. The summoned creature it created would not have high intelligence or combat ability. However, in a scenario where they could be killed at any moment, having the puppy step on a landmine was undoubtedly a brilliant strategy. Therefore, Xiao Tan and Xiao Ling used the Chihuahua to explore the Sky King Hall, Arhut Hall, and the west wing of the Temple of Six Harmonies. They did not conduct a detailed search. They merely confirmed the presence of monsters or instant death events at these 3 locations. Their plan was to explore as many locations as they could before the 8-minute duration of the summoned creature ended. After the puppy disappeared, they would return to explore the area again. Unfortunately, due to the weakening of the active skill, the puppy's duration ended in less than 8 minutes. Even though the 2 were racing against time, they had only explored 3 areas. Before the Chihuahua disappeared, Xiao Tan and Xiao Ling arrived at the fragrance kitchen. Did you smell that? Xiao Tan had a keen sense of smell. He could smell the smell coming from the kitchen even when he was about 10 meters away. Compared to the smell, Spirity replied, raising her finger and pointing upwards. The smoke coming out of the chimney is easier to detect. Under such circumstances, he still has the mood to cook in the kitchen. Wang Tanji shook his head. Could it be, Brother Ju? Do you think, Xiao Ling added, other than our leader, no one else would do something like this? Then, she took out a bottle of red wine from her inventory. No matter what, I'll send a bat in to investigate. As she finished, she activated her only summoning skill, name, summon, vampire bats skill card attribute, active, permanent skill type, summoning effect, summon a vampire bat to fight for you, 20-minute cooldown, 5-minute duration, maximum of 1 vampire bat at a time. Consumption, 2 spiritual energy value, at least 50 milliliters of red wine. Learning requirement, level 10. Summoning mastery will be unlocked after learning. Remark, its attack may not cause too much damage, but it is enough to leave a wound on the target. Its innate ultrasonic ability gives it excellent dodging ability. Be it flying objects or direct attacks, it will be difficult to hit it. One thing to note is that if it leaves your field of vision and does not receive clear instructions, it will take the initiative to attack the closest warm-blooded animal. Just like Xiao Tan, Xiao Ling learned this skill in order to unlock her summoning mastery and increase her mastery of the mastery. However, even though they were both basic summoning skills, Xiao Ling's summon creature was stronger than Xiao Tan's. This was because her skill required an expensive consumable like red wine to activate, unlike Xiao Tan who could use dog whistle as many times as he wanted. But if you let the bat fly in through the window and bite, we still don't know who's in the house. Xiao Tan asked. Stupid. Xiao Ling knocked Xiao Tan's head. The bat can't recognize the person, but the person can recognize the bat. Oh, that's right. With the reminder, Xiao Tan realized. Brother Ju can recognize your summoned creature. If it's him in the house, he will respond to us. He paused for a moment. If it's someone else in the house, this bat might be able to lure the snake out of its hole. That's right, Xiao Ling replied. So, as she muttered, she commanded the brown bat to fly towards the kitchen window. At that moment, the window was open. After all, an ancient building like this would not have an exhaust fan or a range installed. Even if there was a chimney, it was easy to kill someone while cooking with the window closed. Pa 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 pa. Even though it was a low-level summon creature, the vampire bat flew at a very fast speed. However, it made quite a bit of noise when it flapped its wings. About 7 to 8 seconds later, the summoned creature flew into the fragrant kitchen. Then, it never came out again. At the same time, inside the kitchen. Humph! I was wondering why this kind of ingredient would come to me on its own accord. Oink looked at the bat that he had crushed in his hand disintegrate into white light, and he chuckled coldly. So, it's a summoned creature. When he heard the term summoned creature, No Words King, who was squatting in the corner, had his eyes light up. The man who was surrounded by fear and despair had a glimmer of hope. Speaking of which, this student who had managed to kill lying drunk in the S2 preliminaries could be considered an elite among the younger generation of Zombie Blade. It would not be an exaggeration to say that he was Zombie Blade's version of Phantom Dawn, but in this scenario, he was at his worst when he had stopped using his medicine. At the start of the scenario, No Words King was the only player who was directly transported into the Temple of Six Harmonies. This kind of situation, if he handled it well, it would be an advantage, but if he did not, it would be a disaster. As for Fei Fong, it was obvious that he belonged to the latter. In less than a minute, he had accidentally triggered a boss-level battle event. Compared to the woman in red that Xiao Tan's group encountered, the mini-boss that No Words King encountered could be described as hard to look at. In terms of appearance, he had a head of unkempt black hair that was neither too long nor too straight. His sallow face and worried face were unforgettable. In terms of body size, he had the body size of an adult human and the limbs of a hobbit. If the hunchback was a sign of his modesty, then his throat was as thin as a needle, his mouth was as big as a torch, and his stomach was as big as a mountain. These three characteristics undoubtedly represented his attitude toward life. In terms of clothing, his shirtless upper body and bare feet were covered in blood, mud, and feces, probably. This kind of a replicable performance art style of dressing was simple, but not simple, high-end, but not flashy. The short pants made from grass and tree bark that were tied around his waist showed off his untamed personality and wildness that could not be hidden. It gave off an oppressive feeling that one would not have the courage to look up even if they wanted to kneel before him. In conclusion, this man was basically a demonized version of a deformed caveman. However, everyone knew that it was wrong to judge a book by its cover. In recent years, more and more research had shown that there was no direct correlation between one's combat ability and one's appearance. Those who were both handsome, beautiful, and strong merely had an innate racial talent of taunting. No Words King did not intend to underestimate this strange creature. From the beginning, he gave it his all in the battle. However, the skill limitation was a big problem. Furthermore, his opponent was indeed a tough opponent. Therefore, this man and monster fought for a long time in the Great Hall of Six Harmonies Temple. About 10 minutes ago, No Words King won by a hair's breadth. Just as he was about to sit down and catch his breath, second senior brother, No, Oink, suddenly appeared. What happened after that could be summarized in 2 sentences. Oink easily subdued No Words King and brought him back to the kitchen to let him have a taste of the meat soup. What's wrong? At that moment, Oink had just placed his dish into the pot. Even though he was facing away from the player, he could see the player's every move clearly. After knowing that there are other travelers from another dimension nearby, do you think the situation will turn around? Hearing that, No Words King hesitated for 2 seconds before forcing himself to be calm. He replied in a tone that was neither servile nor overbearing. I have no idea what you're talking about. Huh. Oink laughed drily. This is the first time I've heard someone lie in such a harsh tone. After he said that, No Mouth is King did not respond further. Seeing that he did not reply, Oink continued. Fine. Since you think relying on others can turn the situation around, fine. He put down the wooden spoon in his hand and closed the pot lid. I'll go invite them in now. Chapter 989. After releasing the vampire bats, Xiao Ling and Xiao Tan hid in the shadow of a building and observed the commotion inside the kitchen quietly. In less than a minute, the kitchen door was pushed open by someone, and a large man with a pig's head and human body walked out from it. Just as the 2 players were about to discuss how they should deal with this situation, suddenly, excuse me. In the blink of an eye, Oink appeared before Xiao Tan and Xiao Ling. He opened his lips to ask calmly, Why don't you come with me to the kitchen for a chat? This sudden and unexpected change caused the terror points of the 2 players to skyrocket. How did Oink discover them, and how did he manage to move to stand before them? The 2 had no idea at all. The only thing they could confirm at that moment was, this NPC was impossibly powerful. What if we don't want to go? Xiao Ling did not reject the NPC outright, but asked to test the waters. Humph! Oink scoffed and continued. Even though I sounded like I was asking you a question, I don't think you have a choice. He paused. Of course, if you insist on rejecting me, I suggest you consider whether you can do it or not instead of whether you want to or not. That, be it from the man's skill, presence, or language, Xiao Tan had a strong feeling that they needed to back down. I think, he lowered his voice and told Xiao Ling, I think we should go fine. Xiao Ling dragged out her tone and sighed with a shake of her head. She knew very well that if she did not follow the NPC's order, they would be faced with another instant death, and this time, there was no turning back. Therefore, the 2 of them helplessly followed Oink to the kitchen. The distance of several meters was only a matter of time. Once they entered the kitchen, Xiao Tan and Xiao Ling saw No Mouth King squatting in the corner. When their eyes met, suspicion rose in their hearts. Looks like we're not the first batch to be invited in. Xiao Ling muttered to herself as she looked at No Words King. She then glanced at the pot of soup on the stove and asked, Your teammates, don't tell me they've all been cooked by him? He cooked the mini-boss that I just killed. No Mouth King glared at his two opponents from Underworld Frontline and forced himself to put on a tough front. Humph! If not for the fact that I fought with the mini-boss for so long, I wouldn't have been captured by him. Once he said that, Xiao Tan asked him, "You don't look like you're restricted in any way." He pointed his finger at Oink. "When Second Senior came out to capture us, why didn't you run?" "Of course. If I could run, why wouldn't I run?" No Mouth King scoffed. "That man's speed was as fast as teleportation. So how could I say, you too?" At this moment, Oink could not take it anymore. He interrupted them. "Don't you think it's a little rude to keep calling them Second Senior Brother and that guy?" He paused for half a second before adding, "My name is Oink. Remember that." Oh, hearing this, Xiao Ling was enlightened. "So you're Oink." Feng Bujue and Ruo, you had told their teammates about this pig-headed man a long time ago. At the beginning of the game, they would often discuss the characters or events that they encountered in the scenario in detail to share their experience of clearing the scenario. Later, after Brother Ju experienced the Cedar County Hospital scenario at the Monster Kingdom, he found out that Oink was the unique data, so he mentioned it to his teammates again. Xiao Ling had a good memory. Even though she had not seen this NPC in person, when she heard his name, she was instantly reminded of the various descriptions that she had heard about Oink. This name does sound familiar. On the other side, Xiao Tan was reminded of something and mumbled softly, "It's no use even if you've heard of my name." Oink shrugged. He continued, "Since you're already here, you have to follow my rules." "What rules?" Xiao Ling asked. "What does here mean? Is it referring to Six Harmonies Temple? Or Lotus Moon Town? What happened here?" Oink chuckled. "Your questions." He glanced at No Mouth as king. "That kid has already asked all of them." He shook his head and shrugged. "I'll go through the rules first." He opened the pot of soup and used a large spoon to stir it. "If you want me to answer your questions, you have to drink my soup first." Xiao Tan was startled and narrowed his eyes. This rule seems quite polite and you wouldn't say that if you've seen what the mini-boss looks like, Not Talking King said in a weird tone. On the other hand, at the same time, before the door to the abbot's room at Six Harmonies Temple. "Phew! Be careful. I'm going to push the door open." First, Yuan took a deep breath before turning back to warn his teammates. "Don't worry, I'll cover you," Final Assault, who stood not far behind his team leader, replied. After all, these two were professional players, so they had a clear idea of what to do when they explored. After they entered the temple, they did not say anything. They headed straight for the stone pagoda at the center of Six Harmonies Temple. Since Xiao Tan had already cleared the entrance of the temple and cleared out the female monsters behind the three doors, first Yi Wang and Final Assault reached their destination without any hindrance. However, when they arrived at the stone pagoda, they realized that the door to the stone pagoda was sealed. They needed the key to the stone pagoda to open it. Based on first Yi Wang's speculation, the key to this kind of place was most likely with the abbot. Therefore, the two of them sneaked their way to the abbot's room. "Okay, if something happens after we push the door open, you..." As first Yi Wang said that, he placed his hand on the door. Who would have thought? Air. Suddenly, a murmuring sound came from the darkness behind them. In this smelly, dark, and quiet temple, this sound was incomparably ear-piercing. "TSK. They've caught up to us." First of all, the king was a little scared and angry at this moment. His tone of speech and the expression on his face were quite aggressive, and his action was undoubtedly influenced by this mentality, and he became rather reckless. "There's no other way. You go in and find the key. I'll lure these monsters away," First Yi Wang said as he pushed open the wooden door to the abbot's room. Behind the door was a deep darkness. In Umitba, a human shadow chanted softly as he slowly walked out from the door. The two from Zombie Blade reacted quickly as well. They did not care about the consequences. They jumped back one big step and put on their guard. 2 seconds later, a purple-faced monk wearing a black monk's robe and a red kasaya walked out from the abbot's room. His skin color aside, based on his appearance, the monk was young and handsome. No matter how one looked at it, he was no older than 30. He did not look like he was old enough to be the abbot of the temple. However, the staff that he was holding and the kasaya that he was wearing showed that he was not a normal monk. Dear benefactors, after the purple-faced monk stepped out of the door, he looked at the two players from Zombie Blade with a half-smile. This is a place of Buddhism. His eyes turned to the weapons that the two players were already holding. Why are the two of you holding the murderous weapons in your hands? The question that this NPC said was obviously hiding some kind of dangerous flag. If the answer was not good, the result would be predictable. Air. First Wong was the leader of Zombie Blade, so he was not a fool. Even without the aid of medicine, he would not fall for such an obvious trap. Therefore, after a short period of contemplation, he put on a kind expression and bowed with his fists. He was still holding the blade, but he did not dare put it away. Master, this brother and I, for some reason, we were chased by evil spirits and accidentally stumbled into this temple. If we have offended you, please forgive us. Oh, evil spirits? When the purple-faced monk heard these two words, the smile on his face deepened. Under the dim light, the shadows on his face flickered, making his expression seem strange and unfathomable. Benefactor, are you referring to those behind you? Before he finished, several ghosts had already walked through the wall and appeared in the courtyard outside the abbot's room. When First Wong and the others turned back to look, the few monsters that floated at the front were only 10 meters away from them. Yes. First Wong quickly answered. I wonder if the master can help us chase away these ghosts. Ha ha! The purple-faced monk laughed. Benefactors, you must be joking. Monks are merciful. Since you two are already here, how can I just sit here and do nothing? When he said that, the two players exchanged a look and sighed in relief. It looked like the negotiation between First Wong and this NPC was successful. But they did not expect before the NPC could finish, I will help you two now. The next second, the smile on the purple-faced monk's face turned cold. Ascend to the Western Paradise and be spared from the pain of purgatory. The scene returned to the kitchen. At this moment, three players were sitting side by side at a rectangular wooden table. From left to right, they were Xiaoling, Wang Tanji, and Not Mouth King. Oink was by the stove, pouring soup into 3 big bowls. The pig-headed man deftly scooped out 3 bowls of meat soup and placed them on a wooden tray. Then, he carried them with one hand. He placed the 3 bowls before the 3 players. Then, he stood where he was and crossed his arms before his chest. He looked down at the 3 of them and said, The 3 of you have a taste of my cooking, and then we can talk. Air. Although I don't want to be too obvious, but Xiaoten looked at the soup bowl before him with a troubled expression and mumbled. This bowl of soup looks and smells very suspicious. Xiaoling finished the second half of her teammate's sentence. Of course, they were being more tactful with their words. Not Mouth King said directly, What do you mean by suspicious? It's clearly disgusting. Just the sight of it makes me want to vomit. Not Mouth King's comment was quite accurate. The soup that Oink cooked was greasy, and the smell was indescribably disgusting. Calling it a dark cuisine was already being polite. If one had to make an analogy, it would be as disgusting as a pot of urine and feces. Humph! Oink was not bothered by their reaction. He continued with a smile. If you think it's disgusting, you don't have to drink it. Really? The innocent Xiao Tan asked with glowing eyes. Really? Oink's answer was crisp. But not drinking the soup doesn't mean that you can leave. Anyone with a brain could tell that there was a plot twist here. Whether or not they drank this disgusting soup would decide the rest of the story. Just as the players were considering this, suddenly, creak, following the sound of rolling wood, the kitchen door was pushed open from the outside. Then, a figure appeared at the door. What the F***? This curse obviously did not come from any of the players because when they used this kind of curse, it would be blocked by the system. Therefore, the one who uttered those 2 words was, Oink. Yo, long time no see. Feng Bujua looked at the pig-headed man with a smile. With light steps, he walked toward the table where the other 3 were seated. Kid, why are you here? Oink's tone was obviously different from Brother Jew. In any case, it sounded like they were very familiar with each other. Well, Feng Bujua said as he walked to the table. It's a long story, Before he finished, he picked up the bowl of soup before Not-Mouthed King. I'll tell you about it after I drink some water. What the F asterisk CK? This time, Not-Mouthed King gasped internally. Even though Xiao Fei had heard a lot about Feng Bujue, when Brother Zhu really appeared before him and picked up a bowl of extremely disgusting meat soup and poured it into his mouth, Not-Mouthed King was still shocked. Gulp, gulp, gulp. Feng Bujue lifted his neck and his Adam's apple shook. He gulped down the entire bowl of soup in one gulp. Even the meat, bones, and other ingredients were all swallowed by him, much less the soup. This time, not only Not-Mouthed King, even Xiao Tan and Xiao Ling were shocked. And that was not the end of it. Walala. After Brother Zhu finished the soup until there was not a single drop left, he swung his arm and slammed the bowl to the ground. It was like he was drinking a toast of brotherhood. Before the sound of the bowl shattering disappeared, Feng Bujue used his sleeve to wipe his mouth. He looked at Oink and said, not bad, but it's a bit hot. Chapter 990. When Feng Bujue said this, he glanced at Xiao Ling. The latter immediately understood what her captain meant and nodded at him. Then, Xiao Ling used her elbow to nudge Xiao Tan, who was sitting beside her. When Xiao Tan turned to look at her, Xiao Ling had already lifted the bowl in front of her and placed it next to her mouth. I've decided. Xiao Ling stared at the disgusting bowl of meat soup. She gritted her teeth and stomped her feet. Fine, I'll drink it. Before she could finish her sentence, she opened her mouth and pinched her nose. Then, she began to pour the soup down her throat. When Xiao Tan saw this, he understood why Xiao Ling had nudged him earlier. So, he gritted his teeth and stomped his feet. Then, he used both his hands to hold the bowl of soup in front of him. Suppressing the physical and psychological nausea, he gulped down the soup. Within a minute after Feng Bujue appeared, the 3 bowls of meat soup that Oink served were finished by the 3 members of Underworld Frontline. When Xiao Ling finished drinking, she imitated Brother Zhu and smashed her bowl. When she did, Xiao Tan fell as well. When the crashing sound of bowls subsided, No-Mouthed King, who was sitting at the side, finally realized something. That's not right. Looking at the soup dregs and porcelain pieces on the floor, No-Mouthed King thought to himself, doesn't this mean that I can't drink it even if I want to? With that in mind, he immediately raised his eyes to glare at Feng Bujue and growled darkly, Feng, you tricked me. Ha ha. Feng Bujue looked up at the sky and laughed. Yes, I did, he replied in a despicable manner. What can you do to me? Before Brother Zhu finished the second half of his sentence, he had already leaped out and jumped at the stove. Translator's thoughts lonely tree, lonely tree, however, bang. In the next second, the dull sound of a pig's hoof hitting a body was heard. Oink instantly appeared beside the stove and punched No-Mouthed King, who was about to lift the lid of the soup pot to the ground. Ugh, but No-Mouthed King wanted to curse, but before the words could reach his mouth, he realized that he couldn't catch his breath. It was clear that Oink's seemingly simple punch was far more powerful than he had imagined. How dare you? Oink looked at No-Mouthed King, who was lying on the ground, trying to catch his breath. He said coldly, Who allowed you to touch the soup pot? Do you know the rules of the kitchen? Well said, Feng Bujue interjected, as if he was talking to himself. He stood beside Oink with one hand on his waist and pointed at not talking as king arrogantly. Look at you. Do you think you won't be able to cook for at least 8 to 10 years? Shut up. Then Oink turned around and scolded his brother Zhu. Hey, I'm just helping you. Feng Bujue looked at the man innocently and replied, and I'm not wrong. He started to count with his fingers. Wash the toilet for a year, wash the dishes for a year, wash the vegetables for a year, cut the vegetables for a year, mix the vegetables for a year. Shoo. Oink shoved Brother Zhu to interrupt this shameless man. Who asked you to help me? As he said that, he picked up the cleaver from the chopping board and waved it before his brother Zhu. Let me tell you, that's only if we're talking now. If this was 500 years ago, with my temper, I would have stabbed you to death. When Feng Bujue heard that, confusion appeared on his face. 500 years ago. Didn't you use a rake? Ding, 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 ding. Just as Brother Zhu said that, The cleaver in Oink's hand slashed at him. The cleaver was as fast as lightning. However, Brother Jew was prepared. He spun around and retreated. He was unharmed. Oink's cleaver landed on the stove, creating a crisp sound of metal hitting stone. "Kid, I haven't seen you in a while. You've grown quite a bit." After the first round of attacks, Oink did not continue. He stopped and said to Brother Jew, "You flatter me." Fong Bujue replied with a fake smile. "If we're talking about skill, Brother Oink, you're still better than me." "Humph, don't try to get close to me," Oink said as he turned around and slashed at No Mouth King, who was still standing. Before the rising star of Zombie Blade could stand up, his neck was sliced cleanly by the cleaver. Not long after the decapitation, he dissolved into white light and disappeared. So, the rule here is, Fong Bujua looked at this calmly. "If we don't drink the soup that you've prepared, we have to die, right?" "Not necessarily." Oink held the bloodied cleaver and walked to the stone sink to wash it carefully. "You'll die if you can't beat me, right?" He paused. "Of course, if you drink the soup obediently, you won't have to fight me." With just a few sentences, they had basically explained the various events and flags that had happened here. Therefore, it was time for Fong Bujua to show off. "See, I'm just in time." He looked at his two teammates. "I knew Brother Oink's cooking would be good." "Pfft, I just saw it." Xiaoling narrowed her eyes and whispered, but she did not say anything else lest she exposed her captain's information. Actually, with Xiaoling's intelligence and her understanding of Fong Bujua, she had already deduced what had happened earlier. First, when Fong Bujua walked into Xiangji kitchen, he used data observation to see the effect of the soup. After that, he quickly came up with a strategy. While everyone was still in a daze, he took the opportunity to drink the soup of Mouth is King and forcefully raised a death flag for the other party. Then, Big Brother Jew, who finished the soup, gave Xiaoling a look and had her pull Xiao Tan to finish the soup. That way, the 3 bowls of soup that were served by Oink would be gone. Even the action of throwing the bowls was part of Fong Bujua's plan. He had already predicted that if the bowls were still on the table after the 3 of them finished the soup, No Mouth King might be able to eat the leftovers to avoid triggering the no soup death flag. But with Fong Bujue and his teammates throwing the bowls, No Mouth King's chance of survival was completely cut off. Even though Xiao Fei also realized that he had to drink the soup after seeing the actions of the 3 from Underworld Frontline, it was obviously unwise for him to touch the pot of soup. In this place, the players could only accept the soup that Oink gave them. Taking it on their own was a different matter. So they would still die. "All right, stop wasting time." Oink cut them off. "I'm in a hurry. If you have any questions, just ask them." Hearing that, Fong Bujue and his teammates exchanged a look and came to a consensus. Brother Jew was obviously the best person to negotiate with the NPC, so he asked without hesitation, "How did the town end up like this?" 3 nights ago, 3 people broke into the temple to steal the treasure. Oink did not beat around the bush and went straight to the point. They killed the abbot and stole the key. Then, they invaded the pagoda in the stone courtyard and broke through 81 Diana seals, causing the 6 closures mirror to break out of the seal. 6e mirror? Fong Bujue repeated the word with a questioning tone. Due to the same pronunciation, Brother Jew thought Oink said, more than 1,000 years ago, there was a Taoist priest. Oink continued to explain. This man's spell was powerful and cruel. He spent several decades to collect the blood of more than 10,000 people to refine an incredibly evil treasure. He paused for half a second before continuing, and that was the 6 doors mirror. At this point, Oink washed the cleaver in his hand and walked slowly to the stove. He leaned against it and said, the so-called 6e mirror refers to the 6 realms of reincarnation. The 6e mirror in this 6e temple is a result of a misunderstanding. Then this mirror of 6 harmonies, Fong Bujue continued. How did it end up inside the temple of 6 harmonies? To put it simply, an eminent monk sacrificed himself to save the world and died together with that wish. Oink replied, later on, the disciples of the eminent monk placed the stone pagoda of Kasayapa that he used when he was alive here. They sealed the 6 mirror into the pagoda with layers of seals and built temples around the pagoda so that future generations could guard it. Understood. Fong Bujin nodded and asked him, "Let's talk about the 3 thieves. Who are they? Where are they now?" Oink thought for a few seconds and replied, "Strictly speaking, the 3 of them are not humans. The leader is the grand disciple of that witch. His Taoist name is Miao Shuzi. He is half human and half demon. He likes to disguise himself as a young monk. Not only is he proficient in Taoist spells and witchcraft, he has also studied many Zen techniques. Oh, no wonder the 81 seals couldn't stop him." Xiaotan shook his head and added, "The second person," Oink continued, "is a woman. She's a thief, known as the Red Oriole. She's a very strange person. From a human's point of view, she's no doubt a beauty. She's very skilled in martial arts and doesn't lack money. However, she likes to be a thief. She's a kleptomaniac," Xiao Ling added. "If she only likes to steal, then she's a kleptomaniac," Oink continued. "But not only does she like to be a thief, she likes to be a prostitute as well." He shrugged. "A person who combined an entire brothel with a wave of her hand willingly gave herself to the lowest class prostitute. She's not a kleptomaniac, is she?" "Then it's beep," Fong Bujua blurted out, but his words were blocked by the system, so no one knew what kind of weird term he had uttered. "It doesn't matter what it is. After all, she's been killed by that kid over there," Oink said and turned to look at Wang Tanji. "Huh?" Xiao Tan was startled. 2 seconds later, he said, "Oh, you mean the monster in red with the big mouth?" He scratched his head. Are you sure she's a human?" "When she came to steal the treasure, she was still a human," Oink replied. "But after the 6 mirror was broken, she was no longer a human. We'll talk about that later." Fong Bujua brought the topic back. "Let's talk about the 3rd person first. The 3rd person is called Lu Bufu. He's a thief who's famous for his delicious food." Oink scoffed and glanced at the pot of soup on the stove. "The irony is, he's now a pot of meat soup." His words were like an invisible vomit inducer, causing Xiao Tan and Xiao Ling's stomachs to feel an indescribable discomfort. "Of course, it wasn't me who killed him. It was that kid who went by the name of something Wang." Oink said, "I just didn't want to waste the material. That kind of thing doesn't matter." It looked like Fong Bujua did not care about eating Brother Bufu. He continued to ask, "I'm more concerned about what happened when they stole the treasure." "Humph. They're just a bunch of small fries who don't know what's going on. What good can they do?" Oink shook his head and replied in a helpless tone, "When the seal was broken, the 6 mirror appeared. It enveloped the entire Lotus Moon town in the shroud of blood and summoned the 6 paths of evil. Then, the people in the town died quickly under the influence of the shroud. After they died, they were tortured by the shroud of blood and were unable to reincarnate. As for the 3 unlucky bastards, since they knew nothing about the mirror's power, their souls were taken by the mirror, and they became the hosts of the evil spirits." "I see." Xiaotan nodded. "In other words, the 3 of them were possessed by the 6 paths of evil." "No, they weren't possessed," Oink replied. "The 6 paths of evil does not refer to 6 specific individuals, but..." He thought about it for a few seconds and said, "To put it in terms that you can understand, they're the symbols of 6 relatively extreme consciousnesses. These 6 can be entities that exist somewhere in this universe, and they can also be things that do not exist in the physical dimension." He paused. "If you want an analogy, it's like the Tao that you humans often talk about. Tao could be a person, a book, a sentence, or a philosophy." "Then were the 6 paths of evil in this shroud of blood?" Xiao Ling asked probingly. "Lu Bufu is the path of hungry ghosts, and Red Oriole is the path of humanity. Both of them have been eliminated," Oink replied. "Not only have they been eliminated, they're still being digested." Fong Bujue seized the opportunity to mock Oink. "And Miao Shuzi is the path of heaven. Currently, he should be moving around the abbot's room." Oink ignored his brother Bujua and continued, "Other than that, there's a poor soul that was consumed by the mirror 40 years ago. His name is Zhang Ku. He is the path of hell. Currently, he and a mirror are still inside the pagoda. At this point, Oink paused for a few seconds before continuing. The four of them are the hosts of evil spirits that were reflected by the mirror. Basically, they retain their original personality and memory, but in essence, they are a different kind of creature. Then he raised his finger to point at himself. As for the remaining two, one of them is me. Oh, the path of animal, right? Feng Bujue asked. Yes, Oink replied. I was summoned here by the Six Paths mirror as some kind of representative. Unless the shroud of blood absorbs enough lives, or is destroyed, I won't be able to leave. Then, at this point, Feng Bujue's expression shifted, and he asked darkly, what about the path of Azura? Chapter 991. On the other hand, in the courtyard outside the abbot's room, at that moment, a fierce battle had begun. The two parties involved in the battle were naturally the evil spirit of Tian Dao, Miao Shuzi, and the last two members of Zombie Blade's first team. First is King and Final Assault. Miao Shuzi's power was undeniable. First, his physical skill was excellent. Be it in terms of strength or speed, he was not weaker than First as King. Second, he could release his demonic aura to launch various mid-range and long-range energy attacks. Third, he was familiar with various crowd control spells, and it was impossible to guard against them. Other than that, he had the three basic virtues that most powerful bosses had: high defense, high health, and the ability to recover health points during battle. Normally, First is King and Final Assault would not have been afraid of this guy. After all, they were professional players. For them, in a 2 versus 1 situation, a boss of this power level was only slightly above average. But in this scenario, the player's skills were greatly weakened due to the presence of Bloodwall. Under such circumstances, Miao Shuzi was not that easy to deal with. It did not take long for the two members of Zombie Blade's first team to be wounded in the battle. Thankfully, their vitals were not injured, so the loss of life points was not that serious. Unfortunately, no matter the result of this battle, the smell of blood on the two would make them the targets of the ghosts. Let's not talk about things that were far away. Just as they were locked in a fierce battle with Miao Shuzi, the group of ghosts that were slowly drifting over from behind had already come within 10 meters of them. This way, the space for the two players to move became even more limited. After being scratched by the demonic aura again, Final Assault finally could not hold it in anymore and came up with this suggestion. Captain, if this continues, we will all die here. I know. First, his king used a sword to block Miao Shuzi's staff and turned his head to answer. I'm also trying to figure out a solution. Captain, Feiko died earlier. If the two of us die here, then our team will be eliminated. Final Assault rushed forward to provide cover for his captain. From how I see it, with the current situation, we should give up on the key and temporarily retreat. When First as King heard that, he was silent for several seconds. In those few seconds, as he dealt with Miao Shuzi's attacks, he calculated in his mind. He has a point. This purple-faced monk before us is too powerful. It's hard to say whether we can even defeat him, much less in a short amount of time. My original plan was to enter the tower before Underworld Frontline and rely on unlocking the secret of the scenario to turn the tables around, but I did not expect this scenario to be so difficult. With that in mind, he subconsciously glanced at the game menu. Sigh, I have no idea where that kid, no Mouthpiece King, died, leaving us with no way out. No matter how he thought about it, he couldn't think of a better way. Since he was the king, he had no choice but to make a helpless choice before the situation worsened. All right, let's retreat first. He turned to his teammates and said, now that things have come to this, we have to change our strategy. Since we can't be fast, let's take it slow. Let's just leave the temple and find a place to hide. As he spoke, he swung the broadsword in his hand horizontally and used the bramble through thorns. Even though the skill was weakened, at least it had some effect. Once the sword chi was unleashed, it successfully forced Miao Shuzi back. Let's go. Then, he yelled at his teammate. With a kick, he leaped into the air. Final Assault's speed and agility were not bad. He followed his captain closely, leaped over the ghosts that were inches away, and started to run. In the blink of an eye, the two had raced more than 10 meters away and were running toward the temple's gate. Humph! You want to run? Meow Shuzi scoffed. Where can you run to with the smell of blood on you? After saying that, he patted the dust off his body, placed the Buddhist staff in his hand on the ground, and unhurriedly chased after him. Can you do me a favor? At that moment, a cold voice suddenly came from the darkness of the temple. Do not chase after them for now. Oh, Meow Shuzi's eyes moved, and his expression shifted. So, there is someone hiding in the dark. When he turned around, Ruo, you had already walked out from the darkness. Dear benefactor, Meow Shuzi glanced at Ruo, and his eyes stopped at the sword at her waist. Looks like you want to save the two from earlier? That's not what I meant. Ruo replied. If I wanted to help them, I could have shown up when you were fighting. Why would I wait until now? You have a point, Meow Shuzi replied thoughtfully. Then why did you stop me? Someone hopes that the two of them will not die immediately, Ruo said. And I am just trying my best to help him realize his plan. Huh, not die immediately? Meow Shuzi smiled. In other words, they will die eventually. Yes, Ruo replied. When the he that I mentioned thinks that it is time for the two of them to die, even if you don't do anything, we will. While they were talking, the ghosts in the courtyard had already left with the two players from Zombie Blade. In the spacious courtyard, only the two of them were left. Ha! This is interesting. Meow Shuzi chuckled and stepped forward. Although I don't know who this he that you mentioned is, he really doesn't know what is good for him to ask you to interfere with my plan. He approached Ruo step by step. Who do you think you are? In this blood barrier, whether it is them or you, all of you will die. As for how and when you die, it is not up to you to decide. His voice gradually became louder and louder until it became a resounding roar. His body also moved along with the roar. In the next second, the staff wrapped in demonic energy came crashing down on Ruoyu's face. Ruoyu's hand was already holding her sword, ready to face the attack head-on. However, at this moment, a red shadow flashed and came between the two of them. Ruoyu recognized who the intruder was in an instant, so she retracted her hand in time, leaving her sword in its sheath. Meow Shuzi's staff also stopped. However, it was not because he wanted to stop. It was because the staff was caught between two fingers and it could not move an inch further. It is not up to us. After stopping the opponent's attack, Feng Bujue smiled evilly and stared at Meow Shuzi's face with a malicious gaze. Do you think it is up to you? At this moment, Meow Shuzi's expression changed, and he wanted to pull his staff back. However, the staff was caught tightly by Feng Bujue's telepathic finger. No matter how hard he tried to pull, it would not budge. What? Do you want to go back? The evilness in Feng Bujue's smile quickly turned into a wicked one. 2 seconds later, he said, If you want it, just say it. If you don't say it, how will I know you want it? Although you look at me with sincerity, you still have to tell me what you want. Do you really want it? Then take it. At this point, he suddenly separated his fingers. Meow Shuzi was caught off guard. He staggered backward and almost fell. However, Brother Ju was still saying, You don't really want it, do you? Do you really want it? You. After Meow Shuzi steadied himself, he looked at Feng Bujue in shock and anger. He was so angry that he could not speak clearly. How dare you? After adjusting his breath, he shouted, Who are you? How dare you make fun of me? When he said, Who are you? Wang Tanji and Gu Xiaoling also walked in from outside the courtyard. At this second, Ruo Yu, Xiao Tan, and Xiaoling almost said half a sentence in unison. Don't. Unfortunately, it was too late. Meow Shuzi had already asked the question, so ha. Feng Bujue guffawed. He placed his hand behind his back and stood proudly. You don't know who I am, do you? Fine. Then I will introduce you to me today. Listen carefully. God. The other 3 members of Underworld Frontline lowered their heads in shame and held their foreheads with one hand. There's a saying. Then Feng Bujue assumed the demeanor of a storyteller and said loudly, The wind and thunder on the tongue, the stars change in the chest. Generosity becomes the sun, the wind whistles. The following 250 words were composed of poems, folk sayings, and the content created by Fong Bujue. Laughing at the dark sea, breaking through thousands of armies, calculating karma, feeling no fear, committing suicide, not a ghost, not a god, more like a mad demon. Finally, Fong Bujue ended this long, extremely narcissistic, shameless, and malicious self-introduction with a poem. The above is me, Fong Bujue. When Miao Shuzi heard that, he was shocked, dumbfounded, and stunned. He really did not know what kind of expression and words he should use to respond to this man before him. The audience who were watching the match also entered a state where their minds were short-circuited. No matter what, Brother Ju's vocabulary, language skills, and shamelessness were enough to make most normal people gasp in amazement. Ha! Fong Bujue finished the whole sentence and did not even take a breath. He pointed at Miao Shuzi's face with a smile and said, "What's wrong? You're so scared that your face is purple, right?" Miao Shuzi wanted to retort, "My face is purple to begin with," but he had a feeling that if he said that out loud, he would be tricked. So, he adjusted his expression and replied coldly, "Humph, you're just a madman, spouting nonsense, huh?" Fong Bujue scoffed at Miao Shuzi's response. Whether it's nonsense or not. As he said that, he took a few steps toward Miao Shuzi. It depends on whether the person who said it has the ability to make it happen. Seeing that, Miao Shuzi immediately moved to the side and started to deal with his brother Ju without batting an eyelid. From this perspective, Fong Bujue continued, "You're the one spouting nonsense and overestimating yourself." Chapter 992. Humph! Miao Shuzi snorted coldly with a ferocious look on his face. "You just took a hit from my staff, and you're already so proud of yourself? What? Isn't that enough?" Fong Bujue sighed. "Sigh, it seems that you won't understand if I explain it to you." "What don't I understand?" Miao Shuzi asked tentatively. "What you don't understand is..." Fong Bujue was still a few meters away from Miao Shuzi when he said the first half of the sentence. "The influence of the barrier on us has disappeared." When the second half of the sentence reached Miao Shuzi's ears, Fong Bujue had already arrived beside him and used the shameless divine skill, Naughty Kid's lower whip kick. Miao Shuzi fell down with a familiar and inexplicably funny scream. Until his death, he still couldn't figure it out. He was standing steadily on the ground with a staff in his hand. How'd he trip? Fortunately, this question didn't bother him for too long, because his life was soon ended by a kitchen knife. When Miao Shuzi's body fell to the ground and gradually turned into pus and blood, "Ruoyu asked Fong Bujue, "Has the restriction on your skill been lifted?" Before Brother Ju could answer, Xiao Ling walked over and answered, "Yes, the restriction on all three of us has been lifted. It's just that." Xiaotan looked depressed. "We paid a certain price. To be exact, we ate something very disgusting." "I won't ask you what you ate," Ruoyu replied indifferently. "Then let's continue with the operation." Fong Bujue took over from Ruoyu. "I'll tell you about the information we got in the fragrant kitchen later as we walk." When he said that, he squatted down and picked up a stone key about the size of a toothbrush from the pool of blood that was Miao Shuzi. "So far, everything is going according to my plan." He stood up and shrugged. "Although I have no idea what's going on with Zombie Blade and his gang, I can confirm that they're all out of form today. They pose no threat to us." He turned his head and signaled at the tower in the distance with his eyes. "We'll split up. You, me, and Xiao Ling will go to explore the final boss and ultimate treasure in this scenario." He then looked at Wang Tanji. "Xiao Tan, you'll be responsible for tracking first, and final assault." "Huh? You want me to go alone?" Xiao Tan pointed at his own nose and asked, "That won't be a suicide mission, right? How is that possible?" Fong Bujue chuckled and leaned close to Xiao Tan to whisper into his ear. "In this scenario, you have a natural advantage. The fixed effect of Shadow of the Nell allows your fighting and scouting skills to not be affected by the barrier. You were able to one-shot the human spirit because of that." He paused, and now, With the buff from Oink's bowl of meat soup, not only can you ignore the negative effect of the barrier, you can also recover 1% life points every 5 seconds. It's more than enough to deal with 2 injured people who can't use their skills. I see. Xiaotan would always trust his brother, Ju, unconditionally, so when he heard that, he felt much better. Feng Bujue then returned to his normal voice. After all, the ghosts in the town will move toward the 2 from Zombie Blade. With your eagle eye, tracking them should be easy. After you find them, just follow them from afar. Don't rush into action. When we're done here, we'll give you the signal. What's the signal? Xiaotan asked. The activation of the Magatama is the signal. Feng Bujue answered instantly. The Magatama that he mentioned was undoubtedly the Blood Corpse God's Magatama. Every member of the Underworld frontline had a Blood Corpse God's Magatama. When one of them activated the summoning effect, the other's Magatama would enter a cooldown period. One could tell by looking at the status of the items in their inventory. Be careful, Feng Bujue said. After the Magatama is activated, in another 15 minutes, you can make your move. He paused for 2 seconds before adding, oh, of course, if you're in danger. For example, if the other party discovers your whereabouts and wants to fight you to the death, you can ignore the signal. Your life is the most important thing. It's okay for us to send you out in advance. Okay, got it, Xiaotan nodded. Then I'll go now. It'll be easier to follow them when they're not too far away. Go, go. Xiaoling walked over and patted his head. Be careful on the road. Xiaotan showed a gentle smile and nodded at his girlfriend. Their brief and unassuming exchange caused real damage to many of the single people watching the live stream. 5 minutes later, at the pagoda in the stone courtyard. At this time, Feng Bujue had used the stone courtyard's key, consumable, to open the entrance. He stood at the foot of the pagoda with his 2 teammates. The pagoda had 6 floors. The iron pagoda was tall, narrow at the top, and wide at the bottom. The eaves were octagonal, and there were windows facing the door. Other than the small windows on the pagoda, even the door was square. It made the pagoda look angular and strong. Feng Bujue lifted his head to look at the tall tower and mumbled weakly, just by standing here, I can feel a sense of unease, Ruoyu, and Xiao Ling understood what he meant. He was actually implying that he had sensed danger in the pagoda through the data perspective. It doesn't matter, Ruoyu said coldly. You're the one leading the way. If there's a situation, just shout. We'll act according to the situation. That's right. We're counting on you, Captain, Xiao Ling said with a teasing smile. Hey, you guys still know that I'm a captain? Feng Bujue could not help but turn around and complain. You guys decided the next course of action without permission. The pagoda's terrain is narrow. It's not good for Xiao Ling. I didn't drink the meat soup, so my skills are still limited, Ruoyu said immediately. You're the only one with all your skills. Her words made sense, and Brother Ju had nothing to say to that. Tisk, Feng Bujue spread his hands and shook his head. Then he pushed the wooden door of the pagoda. The door to the pagoda was very heavy, but there was no latch on the inside, so Brother Ju pushed it open easily. If the stench of blood in Liyue Temple was several times stronger than in Lotus Moon Town, then the stench of blood in this pagoda was several times stronger than anywhere else in Liyue Temple. This smell was undoubtedly challenging the limits of the human's olfactory system. This was not something that could be overcome with willpower. It was a real physical injury. Sure enough, 10 seconds after the door was opened, Ruoyu noticed something? Then, she quickly retreated 5 or 6 meters. It seems I'll have to wait here for you guys, Ruoyu said after she stood still. What's wrong? Xiao Ling was confused. She knew that her cousin was not retreating because of fear, so there had to be a reason behind it. The smell inside the pagoda will cause my life points to decrease continuously, Ruoyu answered. It will decrease by 1% every 5 seconds. No wonder. Feng Bujue understood what was going on. So this is where the extra buff of Oink's meat soup comes from. If I knew this, I would have gone with Xiaotan. Ruoyu said, how about I give it a try now? I don't think that's necessary. Feng Bujue said, just wait here for us. He smiled meaningfully. I believe, in at most 10 minutes, you'll be able to help us. Is that so? Ruoyu replied. Okay then, I'll wait here. Okay, Feng Bujue answered and then turned to Xiaoling. Let's go. Then, he took out the compound anti-gravity gun, turned on the searchlight, and stepped into the pagoda. Hearing this, Spirity quickly took out her perpetual torchlight and quickly followed him. With Feng Bujue leading the way, the two hurried up the pagoda. First floor, second floor, third floor, they arrived at the fourth floor of the pagoda without any hindrance. Of course, that did not mean that there were no obstacles on the first 3 floors. It was just that Brother Ju managed to avoid all the triggered traps and negative events. However, the situation was different on the 4th floor. Even if someone in the team could observe the data, it was useless because from this point onwards, all the events would be triggered. Unless you did not want to come, you would have to deal with it. Creak, 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 creak. Stepping on the creaking wooden stairs, Feng Bujue ascended to the 4th floor of the pagoda. The first thing that caught his eye was a figure. Unlike the 3 floors below, this floor had no walls, pillars, screens, or furniture. Simply put, it was empty. Other than the stairs at both ends of the floor, the only thing left was the person standing in the middle. What is it? 2 seconds later, Xiaoling also walked up the stairs. She glanced in front of her and asked in a low voice, NPC and boss. Feng Bujue also lowered his voice and turned his head to reply, It should be possible not to fight. Let me talk to it. Before he finished speaking, he had already stepped forward and walked toward the figure. Upon closer inspection, he could see that the person had a nose and eyes. The problem was that the number of noses and eyes was not right. He had an oval-shaped melon head with a hairstyle that looked like a lightning rod. Around his head, there were 6 eyes and 8 ears. On one side of his face, there were 3 noses and 2 big mouths under each of the noses. Other than the head, the other parts of the NPC were normal. Overall, he was an adult man wearing a black round-necked robe, similar to a traditional Chinese costume. He was about 7 meters tall and was on the thin side. Brother. Feng Bujue walked to stand before him and used a slower speed to say, I wonder, before he could finish his sentence, the left mouth of the NPC quickly interrupted, Know what you know. You? Song Ming, looked like he wanted to curse, but he swallowed his words and laughed. Fine, I won't argue with you. Obviously, Brother Ju had seen through the key flags in the conversation with this NPC. 1. He had to reply, I don't know. 2. He had to make it clear that he wanted to answer the question. As long as these 2 key points were pointed out, then the NPC would not easily attack the player. Listen carefully. The first question, several seconds later, Song Ming started to read the question. 1 yin and 1 yang, 1 short and 1 long, 1 day and 1 night, combined into 1 pair. This is Ming. Feng Bujue did not wait for the NPC to finish the question and gave the answer. Song Ming's expression, even though he did not have eyebrows, shifted slightly. You do have some skills. Isn't that obvious? Brother Ju did not comment. Then, tell me the second question. Okay, I'll give you the first half of a couplet. You can try to match it. Song Ming cleared his throat and used both of his lips to read. Mountains and rivers are high and low. Everywhere is beautiful. Ha! Ha ha! Feng Bujue laughed, but did not say anything. What are you laughing at? Song Ming asked. You can't match it, so you're laughing to hide your guilt? I can't match it? Huh. Feng Bujue started to pace around the NPC. I'm a literary giant. How can I not match this kind of couplet? He scoffed. I just think your couplet is ridiculously simple. Then you're right. Song Ming yelled. That's right. I can come up with a couplet of this level. Feng Bujue really could come up with a couplet. He turned around and said, feces, urine, big and small, are often sticky and smelly. At that moment, the whole world was shocked. Song Ming as an NPC was shocked. Xiaoling as a teammate, was shocked. Missin, as a spectator and Brother Jew's editor, was shocked. Everyone watching this match was shocked. Song Ming-er was stunned for a long time and did not know what to say. What do you think? Such a perfect couplet with such a deep meaning. I'm sure this is the first time you've seen something like this in your life, right? Fong Bujue saw the reaction and added proudly, this couplet sure is perfect. Song Ming mumbled, "It's true that I've never seen something like this before." At this point, his tone started to reveal a pained expression. As for the meaning, I don't think you'll be able to appreciate it. Fong Bujue did not give the man a chance to finish and cut in. Your culture and taste are too different from mine. Why don't you go and study for a few more years before coming to discuss the meaning of meaning with me? After saying that shamelessly, he immediately changed the topic. Now, let's talk about the third question. Okay, Song Ming did not want to talk about the couplet anymore. After all, he only needed to answer the second question. Therefore, he adjusted the expression on his face and asked, "Listen carefully, please answer me. What is hell? What is heaven?" This third question was obviously a question about Zen. Earlier, when Song Ming described Miao Shuzi as intelligent, talented, and well-versed in Zen, he was actually hinting to the player that the next three questions were riddles, couplets, and Zen. And such an obvious hint was naturally seen through by Fong Bujue slap. Half a second later, before Song Ming could finish, Brother Ju slapped him harshly across the face. This sudden action stunned Song Ming but after a short moment of shock, what followed was anger. In an instant, a substantial wave of hostility burst out from Song Ming-er's body. He was about to hit. However, in the next second, Fong Bujue said in a very calm tone, "This is hell." When he said this, Song Ming-er was stunned. Then, Brother Ju stepped forward and pulled out Bell's daily knife from his waist. He grabbed Song Ming-er's braid with one hand and used the other to cut off the tuft of hair easily. For some reason, Song Ming-er did not resist Fong Bujue's action at all. He just stood there and watched as Fong Bujue cut off his hair and tossed it away. The black, taut strands of hair, after leaving Brother Ju's hand, dissipated into the air and turned into wisps of black smoke. As the smoke drifted away, there seemed to be a faint sound of weeping echoing in the fourth floor. At the same time, the hostility on Song Ming-er's body disappeared with the black smoke. His appearance quickly returned to that of a normal human, other than the number and position of his facial features returning to normal. Looking at the top of his head, where the braid had originally covered, there were now 6 incense scars. Amipa. Song Ming-er put his palms together and chanted Buddha's name. He bowed deeply to Fong Bujue. Brother Ju still looked lazy and casual as he replied, "This is heaven." Song Ming-er nodded and continued, "Almsgiver, your wisdom is vast, and your realm is extraordinary. This little monk is in awe of you." When he said this, his figure had already turned blurry. "Thank you, almsgiver, for your help." "You're welcome." Fong Bujue clasped his hands together and said, "See you never." After saying this, he turned and gave Xiao Ling a look, indicating for her to follow. When the two of them stepped onto the stairs to the 5th level, Xiao Ling could not help but look back, but found that there was no one behind her. Chapter 994. On the other hand, on Wang Tanji's side, with the advantage in terms of both intelligence and power, Xiao Tan did not have to worry about anything when he moved. Therefore, he quickly tracked down the tracks of the first and last assault and stared at them from afar. Even though the two had been on alert, their scouting mastery was not that high. Combined with the constant presence of ghosts, the chance of them discovering Xiao Tan was close to 0. These two, are they trying to escape the town? After following them for 5 minutes, Wang Tanji saw through their intention. His guess was not wrong. First He Shall Be King and Final Assault wanted to escape from Lotus Moon Town. Even though the two members of Zombie Blade did not have much information, they were professional players, so it was not hard for them to figure out the reason behind the barrier. After the plan to solve the scenario failed, The first plan that First Yi Shall Be King came up with was to escape from the barrier. Based on First Yi Shall Be King's plan, if he and his teammates could successfully escape from Lotus Moon Town, there would be at least 3 benefits. 1. The ghost would stop chasing after them. 2. The skill restriction would be removed. 3. They would not run into anyone from Underworld Frontline in the near future. To put it simply, he planned to use time and distance to reduce the disadvantage that he was currently at and drag the battle into a protracted one. Unfortunately, none of his plans and reactions were outside of a certain someone's expectations. In fact, ever since First Yi Shall Be King was attracted by Feng Bujue's mountain song and appeared before him, it was as if he had fallen into his enemy's grasp, and he could not escape. At this point, why don't we take a look back at First Yi Shall Be King's experience after he encountered Brother Ju. First, he was injured by Brother Ju and was followed as a lab rat. Then, after 10 minutes of running, he finally reunited with his teammates, but he was still under surveillance. When Feng Bujue went to Oink to help Xiao Tan and Xiao Ling, he also arranged for Ruo Yu to secretly follow First Yi Wang and Final Assault to ensure that they could survive for a while longer. Thus, the scene of Ruo Yu stopping Miao Shuzi appeared. Then, they were targeted by Xiao Tan again. In conclusion, Zombie Blade, the team leader, had never left the Underworld Frontline's line of sight. His life and that of his teammates could be taken at any moment. If someone used the video to analyze this match, they would come to this conclusion. 10 minutes after the match started, Zombie Blade Team 1 had already lost, because in those 10 minutes, of the 2 people who came into contact with Feng Bujue, one was dead and the other was injured. One broke the balance of the situation, while the other became a chess piece for the opponent to consolidate their advantage. I can really see the border. After tailing them for another few minutes, Xiao Tan saw a layer of gray barrier in the distance. The barrier appeared to be some kind of translucent energy field. In a moonlit night, it was hard to notice from afar, but upon closer inspection, one could see a light effect that was similar to refraction. This is not good. There are no more houses ahead, and the crops in the fields are all withered. Xiao Tan whispered to himself as he tailed them. Even if the opponent's eyesight is normal, in an open space without any other cover, with only a group of translucent ghosts as cover, I will still be exposed. That being said, he couldn't just watch the 2 of them leave his sight. If there was no other way, he would have to show himself. If worst came to worst, he could just kill them. It was better than losing them. Thankfully, he did not have to do that, because when he reached the border, First Yi Wang and Final Assault, he stopped. Damn it, I knew it would not be that easy. Touching the barrier before him, First Yi Wang grumbled with depression. Hum. Final Assault immediately clenched his fist and knocked on the invisible barrier, but it felt like his fist was punched into a semi-solid cement. He could not exert any strength at all. This, we will need to use a powerful energy skill to create a gap, Final Assault said. That's right. First King shook his head and sighed. But right now, our skills are restricted. We can't use high-intensity energy attacks. So, Final Assault gulped and turned to look at the town behind him. Is there no choice but to go back? Looks like we have no other choice. First Yi Wang soon accepted the reality before him and came up with a plan of action. We should turn back to the town and deal with the smell of blood on us first. He turned around and said, those ghosts are too troublesome. If we want to avoid them, we have to keep moving at a certain speed. This will seriously affect the recovery of our stamina points. Furthermore, they will expose our location and make it easy for the people from Underworld Frontline to track us down. But the problem is, Final Assault said, even if we stop the bleeding, the smell of blood on our clothes will still attract the ghosts. He shrugged and continued helplessly. So far, all the rivers and wells that we have seen are dry. There is no water to clean our clothes, and we cannot take off our clothes and throw them away. I know. First Yi Wang waved his hand and interrupted his teammate. The reason I brought this up is naturally because I have already thought of a solution. Oh, hearing that, Final Assault's eyes glowed. What solution? Since we are unable to completely clean up the smell of blood. First Yi Wang replied, Then we could try to use a stronger smell to cover up the smell of blood. You're right. Final assault was enlightened. That makes sense. First, Yuang nodded at him. In any case, come with me. Actually, on the way here, I've already considered this situation, so I noticed a pigsty at the northeast corner of the village. On the other hand, back at Luhe Temple, after dealing with Song Ming'er's scenario, Brother Ju and Xiao Ling climbed up to the 5th floor of the tower. In the middle of this floor, there was a human-shaped ghost floating in the air. His face was covered by long hair, and it was hard to tell. His whole body was covered in a layer of flesh-colored armor, and the surface of the armor was covered with twisted patterns. When a normal person saw someone like that from afar, they would be a bit scared, but Feng Bujua walked toward the man without hesitation. Soon, Brother Ju realized that the other party was not wearing any armor at all. The flesh-colored, thick material was all skin and flesh. "Are you Zhang Ke?" Feng Bujua asked without hesitation. But the other party did not answer him, or rather, he did not use language to answer him. 2 seconds later, Zhang Ke groaned and raised his head abruptly. Brother Ju raised the searchlight and shone it on the other party's face. It was a face covered in twisted patterns, and it was in extreme pain. Other than the eyes, the other facial features were hard to discern. The only distinguishable features were the eyes, and only the whites of the eyes were visible. When the white light shone on his face, Zhang Ke went berserk. He roared and opened his arms. At that moment, the whole floor was shrouded in an oppressive aura. The sudden appearance of invisible spiritual pressure caused Brother Ju and Xiao Ling's shoulders to sink, like they were being weighed down by several times their own weight. This kind of reaction, Brother Ju said calmly. Then I'll take it as yes. Feng Bujia knew very well that this Zhang Ke was not the final boss of this scenario. In fact, he should be the least difficult one to kill of the 6 spirits. 40 years ago, Zhang Ke used his own craftsmanship to forge a key to the stone courtyard and sneaked into the tower. As a normal person, he naturally did not have the power to break the seal inside the tower. Therefore, after a series of accidents, before he reached the 2nd floor, he was injured by a defensive spell. Then, in a moment of panic, Zhang Ke's blood dripped on the floor. If this drop of blood had been outside the tower, it would have been fine. But inside the tower, it belonged to the sealed interior. Therefore, the 6 entrances mirror reacted to the blood and directly sucked Zhang Ke's 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls to the top. In the following 40 years, the poor man was repeatedly tortured by the vengeful spirits in the mirror, experiencing the agony of a Vichy purgatory. The flesh armor on his body was actually the accumulation of scars from the countless tortures. Then, when Miao Shuzi and the rest broke the seal on the mirror, Zhang Ke, as the last spirit to be sucked into the mirror, carried the resentment of the Naraka realm and appeared inside the tower. Based on Oink's description, this man's soul has been tortured beyond recognition. He might not even have consciousness left, much less rationality. Instead of calling him a spirit, it would be more accurate to call him a blob of flesh that carried power. Of course, even without intelligence, he still had some power. The system had placed this evil spirit of the Naraka realm here, which was equivalent to setting up a benchmark to test one's strength. There was no need for strategy to deal with him, but there had to be a certain level of attack to end the battle. In conclusion, there were only 2 types of people who could pass this place. The first type was those who had already solved the scenario and had drunk Oink's meat soup. The second type was those who were strong enough to kill Zhang Ke while their skills were limited and their life points were draining. Without a doubt, Feng Bujue and Gu Shaoling belonged to the former category. And as for the 2 from Zombie Blade, to be honest, even if they really managed to snatch the key from Yao Shuzi, they would not have survived after they entered the tower. Then, let me help you free yourself. After waiting for 2 seconds, Feng Bujue put down the searchlight. He raised both of his hands, and Wicked King's flame purgatory scorch was unleashed. To be safe, Brother Ju even activated body enhancement spell, modified, to increase the power of the skill. He wanted to finish the boss in one hit. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Instantly, the shadow of a fist danced, and the black flame wreaked havoc. As the flame burned, there was a roar. Several seconds later, the pressure on the floor lightened, and the death of the boss was announced. Okay, this is going to be a good show. Before the meat completely disappeared, Feng Bujue turned around to tell Xiaoling. Then, he took out the Blood Corpse God's Magatama from his inventory. Chapter 995. The night was thick, and the fog was thick. By then, it had been more than 2 hours since the start of the match. In the sky, the already dim moonlight, for some reason, it dimmed even more. Captain, do you feel like our surroundings have suddenly darkened? Final Assault, who was resting next to the pigsty, pinched his nose and asked in a muffled voice. Probably the guys from Underworld Frontline have triggered some kind of scenario. First Assault, who was squatting next to him, was in a similar state. He lifted his head to look at the sky and said, "Based on my prediction, the moonlight will not change. It is the barrier that has changed." "Oh." Final Assault nodded and said, "Then I hope they trigger a few more death flags. It would be best if they lose 2 or 3 of their own. Based on the difficulty of this scenario, that is indeed possible," First Assault said. "Of course, no matter what the situation is, we still need to follow our own pace. We need to recover the life points and stamina points that we have lost first." He sighed. "Phew. After all, we have already escaped from the ghosts. At least we have stopped the situation from worsening." "Yes," Final Assault said, "but the price that we have to pay is a bit." When he said that, the disgust on his face was palpable. Obviously, rolling around in a pigsty was not a comfortable thing, and it was definitely not something to be proud of. However, First Assault's idea did work. They successfully covered their bodies with a smell that was thicker than the smell of blood, and that helped them escape from the monsters. "Stop complaining. We are professionals. This kind of price is nothing," First Assault said. "Think about it. If it was Feng Bujue, perhaps he would have jumped into a manure pit without hesitation. Hey, can we not compare ourselves to a madman?" Final Assault narrowed his eyes and grumbled. Just as the two were chatting, suddenly, Final Assault's expression shifted, and he jumped up from his seat. "Captain, do you feel that?" "Feel what?" First Assault was confused. It looked like he had no idea what his teammate was talking about, but he had already noticed that something was wrong. "What's wrong with you?" "I can't really explain it." Cold sweat slid down Final Assault's forehead, and his terror points were climbing. "It feels like somewhere there's a pair of eyes staring at my back." "Could it be?" First Yue stood up and looked around. "Someone used a mental interference skill on you?" In the blink of an eye, before the two from Zombie Blade understood what was going on, a shadow was already rushing toward them. That figure was as fast as lightning and as quiet as the wind. In the blink of an eye, he had already rushed from the darkness nearly 50 meters away to the front. In that split second, trying to sneak up on me? After all, First as King was a top-notch expert. Even if his skills were limited, his physical skills and reaction speed were still strong enough. He immediately snorted and drew his sword to meet him. "You'll have to get through me first." In the next second, his sneer froze on his face, and the confidence in his heart shattered in an instant. Because Wang Tanji had really passed him, and after passing him, he took Final Assault's life with one slash. This is impossible. First as King turned his head around in fear and saw his teammate's head fly up, and blood splattered everywhere. The blood splattered on First as King's face, and it made his expression look incredibly bleak. 2 seconds later, Wang Tanji's figure appeared behind Final Assault's body that was still standing. It is meaningless to comment on something that has already happened. Due to the speed of his attack, the touch of Altair that he used to complete the assassination did not even touch a drop of blood. First as King stood with his sword. In this dangerous situation, a thought flashed across his mind. You can use your skills without restriction? No wonder you're a professional. You immediately came up with a logical and correct speculation, Xiaoten answered honestly. Indeed, if it had been in a situation with limited skills, It would have been impossible to achieve such a feat first, before Xiao Tan launched the attack. He had used Cross on final assault to increase the damage. Secondly, he relied on Shadow Soul Seeker, which had been enhanced by Death Knell Shadow of the Death Knell. Other than that, when he used Shadow Soul Seeker to get close to his target, he had to use Shadow of the Devil Bat to get through first is King's defense. In conclusion, this seemingly short and simple attack was actually an extremely difficult task. It not only required the cooperation of 3 skills, but also required extremely accurate prediction and godlike reaction time. To be fair, an ambush like this, even if there was no restriction on both sides, it was possible to achieve an instant kill. With this attack alone, all the professional and non-professional players who were watching this match could confirm that Wang Tanji was definitely one of the top assassins in Thriller Paradise. Looks like you plan to deal with us alone. After a few seconds of stalemate with Xiao Tan, first Yue Wang confirmed that there was no other enemy around them, so he decided to test the waters. That's right. Wang Tanji was a good young man who did not like to lie. In the current situation, there was no need for him to lie. But I have to remind you, there is no you anymore. Now, there's only... His words were very appropriate, because at the same time he said these words, the final assault's corpse turned into white light and dissipated. Okay, first is King raised his sword with one arm and pointed the tip at his enemy. Since things have come to this, I have nothing more to say. Let's see who's the real deal. 10 minutes earlier, inside the stone courtyard of Luhe Temple. Boom! A loud explosion pierced through the night sky. At that moment, the stone wall on the 6th floor of the tower exploded. 2 black shadows wrestled with each other and fell from the sky. Ruo Yu, who stood at the bottom of the tower, looked up and quickly identified one of the 2 as the Blood Corpse God. As for the figure that was fighting the Blood Corpse God, it was an unfamiliar humanoid creature. I told you. About 2 seconds later, Feng Bujue poked his head out from the gap in the tower and yelled at Ruo Yu, and at most 10 minutes, you'll be able to help. Then, he jumped down as well. Then, Xiaoling's figure appeared at the gap. However, she did not jump down. Instead, she took out her sniper rifle and chose to stay at the top to provide support. On the other side, the Blood Corpse God and the creature had fallen to the ground several seconds ago. When these 2 boss-level monsters landed, they caused the ground within a 100-meter radius to tremble and create a large hole in the ground. But 1 second later, they stood up like nothing had happened and continued to fight. Not long after, the sound of fists hitting flesh and feet hitting bones could be heard in the stone courtyard. This multiverse is really interesting. While the Blood Corp God was fighting, he was still talking with ease. I can't believe I've met another guy who can ignore my fear projection. The unknown creature was not to be outdone. He replied with a hoarse voice, I didn't expect a monster like you to be so good. After the 2 of them flattered each other, they seemed to have reached a consensus. Then they started to get serious. As soon as they finished speaking, the strength and speed of the 2 people instantly increased by a level. About 10 meters away. What's his background? Ruo Yu looked at her brother Ju, who had just landed, and asked. He's an enlightened monk. His Buddhist name is Xian Hong, Feng Bujue replied. The one who killed the demon? Ruo Yu's mind was very sharp. Yes, that's him. Brother Ju replied. Then he changed the topic. Unfortunately, he's just a spirit that's been parasitized by a demonic instrument. As he said that, he raised his hand and pointed at Xian Hong, who was fighting the Blood Corpse God. Look at his chest. I noticed it from the beginning. Ruo Yu replied casually. Is that the hexagon mirror? Yes. Feng Bujue replied. So, Ruo Yu looked at him and asked, What's your plan? It's simple. As Feng Bujue spoke, he took out the blade that was necessary to break through defenses. I'll take care of him in 10 minutes. Then, I'll take the mirror and study it. The rest will be for the Blood Corpse God Supper. Chapter 996. Inside the Six Harmonies ancient temple, under the blood barrier, the Inkal mutants were fighting against the Six Paths evil spirits. This was a battle between evil and evil, as well as a clash between the strong and the strong. The toughness of their physical bodies was at the peak of perfection. Every move they made had the power to destroy mountains and split rocks. Moreover, the moves they used in the fight were also at the point of perfection. They had already reached the realm of great skill without any effort. Logically speaking, it was difficult for others to intervene in a battle of this level. However, the members of the underworld frontline could keep up with the rhythm of the battle. They could even decide the outcome of the battle. Bang! Suddenly, the sound of a gunshot pierced through the air. A bullet that was shining in the darkness hit the Six Paths mirror in front of Xian Hong's chest at the most opportune moment and from the most opportune angle. Divine Judgment was a skill that could deal 200% damage to evil spirits. It was Xiaoling's first choice at this moment. She saw the opportunity and pulled the trigger without hesitation. However, Xian Hong's reaction after he was hit was shocking. Buzz, buzz. After the bullet hit, there was a buzzing sound. Then, the Six Paths mirror's surface was filled with white light. In the next second, not only was Xian Hong unharmed, but the mighty aura around him was even stronger. What's going on? Xiaoling moved her gaze away from the scope and looked at Xian Hong, who was under the tower. He really knows how to cause trouble for me. The bloody corpse deity muttered. Then, he raised his voice and shouted, "Don't use similar attacks again. This guy is a combination of demon weapon and holy body. He can use both the holy and demon powers for himself." "TSK, you should have said so earlier," Xiaoling muttered. Then, she changed her ammunition. "Then, I'll use high-tech ammunition to fight." On the other hand, the two people under the tower, the holy power of the Xianyuan sword is far beyond what the opponent can absorb. You don't have to worry about weapons. Before joining the battle, Brother Ju specially reminded Ruoyu. However, your skills are still affected by the barrier. You have to be careful. If you feel that there's danger, just retreat. Understood, Ruoyu replied simply. In such urgent situations, Ruoyu would usually follow Brother Ju's orders unconditionally because she had absolute trust in his judgment. "Okay, follow me," Feng Bujue said, then bent over with his sword and rushed forward. Upon seeing this, Ruoyu responded to the situation by unsheathing her sword and following him like a shadow. The two of them spread out, one to the left and one to the right. They flashed out from behind the blood corpse god and danced with saber light and sword shadows. Originally, Xian Hong hadn't paid much attention to the oddly dressed humans around him, but he had never expected that the two who had come were at the same level as the blood corpse god in terms of fighting, or perhaps even stronger. For a moment, swords and sabers clashed, and their fighting auras surged. After 10 moves, Xian Hong was at a disadvantage. After 30 moves, it was difficult for him to resist, and he started to get injured. However, he was still able to rely on his HP and recovery ability to barely hold on. After 50 moves, it was impossible for him to turn the tables. This kind of battle is really rare. As he was on the verge of defeat, Xian Hong's gaze swept over Ruoyu and Feng Bujue. He laughed coldly. "Taoist, holy sword, evil mad demon." He looked at the blood corpse god again. "And there's also an innate mutant who came out of nowhere." "Ha ha ha!" Xian Hong laughed as he fought and spoke. At the moment when victory was almost decided, a look of determination appeared in his eyes. "It seems that I won't be able to escape this calamity today." As soon as he finished speaking, Xian Hong raised his arms and waved his sleeves. In an instant, a surge of power gushed out from the mirror in front of his chest. At this moment, the blood corpse god, Feng Bujue, and Ruoyu all had the same reaction. Instead of retreating, the three of them advanced. They forcibly resisted the pressure of the power and attacked with all their might. Ping! The blood corpse god's punch hit the 6 closed mirror. Chi! Ruoyu's Xianyuan sword cut off Xian Hong's neck. Crack! Feng Bujue's blade of absolute defense broke Xian Hong's knee. After these 3 attacks hit, the 3 of them were unable to resist the impact of the power and were all sent flying. Obviously, Xian Hong had wanted to use a suicidal attack just now. However, his intention was instantly seen through by the 3 people in front of him and was promptly killed. Bang! In the next second, the sound of a sniper rifle rang out again. Xiao Ling, who was on the 6th floor of the pagoda, adhered to the good habit of cutting the weeds and eliminating the roots. She fired an explosive bullet at Xian Hong's head, who had already flown into the air, and blasted him into meat paste. Bah! A few seconds later, Feng Bujue was the first to stand still. He spat out a mouthful of blood and said, "Little guy actually wanted to self-destruct. Fortunately, I didn't let him use his move. After Ruo, you stopped a retreat." A touch of red appeared on her white cheeks. It seemed that the qi and blood in her chest had not yet calmed down. Damn it, it hurts. The blood corpse god was the last to stop. After stopping, he knelt on one knee. "I will eat you clean from skin to bone." He viciously muttered 2 words. Then, his expression changed. He lowered his head and vomited a large pool of blood on the ground. Due to his body size and standing position, most of the power of the impact just now was borne by the blood corpse god alone. If it was not for his strong body and amazing recovery ability, he would have been lying on the ground by now. "I advise you not to go over." Suddenly, a voice came from the entrance of the stone courtyard. "The show has just begun." Everyone turned around and saw Oink, who was walking toward them. "What? You still want to cook him for me, chef?" "Chef!" The blood corpse god took 2 deep breaths and stood up as if nothing had happened. "No." Before Oink could reply, Feng Bujue spoke first. "The show he was talking about should be." As he spoke, he used his eyes to look at Xian Hong's corpse. At this moment, the corpse was sprawled on the ground. It did not even have a head. However, the surface of the 6 Paths mirror was still changing. They saw that the red light in the mirror was floating, reflecting layers of red vortexes. The surface of the mirror was like a blood abyss that led to another dimension. It was resonating with some kind of energy. "Oh!" The blood corpse god glanced at the mirror, then looked up at the sky. Could this be the same origin of the holy and demon, the fusion of blood and evil? Oink continued in a low voice. "The last insurance that Xian Hong left behind was his Dharma body. Now that the Dharma body has been destroyed by you, the last bit of his primordial spirit has dissipated." He paused for half a second and laughed. "Heh! Now, there is nothing that can suppress the demonic nature of the 6 Paths mirror. Its self-consciousness has started to absorb the accumulated energy of the blood veil barrier in its own body. It wants to transform itself into a higher level of life form. Why didn't you mention this just now?" The blood corpse god glared at Oink. He tilted his head and looked like a gangster looking for trouble. It should be noted that when Feng Bujue was listening to Oink's explanation in the kitchen, he secretly took out the blood corpse god's jade magatama from his bag so that the blood corpse god could share some information. As mentioned earlier, the blood corpse god and the jade magatama could hear the sounds of the outside world. That was why the blood corpse god asked this question. It was because of this that he was able to address Oink as chef the moment he saw him. "Humph, you still don't get it?" Feng Bujue spoke before Oink could. "We've been fooled by him." "Fooled? Isn't that a bit inaccurate?" Oink looked at Feng Bujue and replied coldly. "We're just using each other, aren't we?" "Ha! You're right," Feng Bujue said. "You've indeed helped us a lot. However, at the same time, you've also lied to us about certain things." "Looks like you already know what those things are," Oink said. "I guess so." Brother Jew put away his weapon and shook his head with a smile. "First of all, you're not the evil spirit from the animal path, right?" "No, I'm not." At this point, there was no need for Oink to hide anything anymore. "The real animal path has been dealt with by me before I met Fei Chu Wang." Feng Bujue muttered. "Secondly, based on your understanding of this town, this temple, and this magic tool, you're the one who orchestrated this blood sacrifice, right?" "That's right." Oink replied. "There's a mastermind behind Miao Shuzi, Hong Ying, and Lu Bufu's plan and support." "That's me." "But why didn't you do it yourself?" "Ruo, you asked. With your ability, the monks in the temple and the seal in the tower shouldn't be a problem. The problem lies with the mirror itself," Oink replied. "You've noticed it as well, haven't you? Those who have come into direct contact with the hexagonal mirror have all been influenced by it. Even Xian Hong's avatar was eventually taken over by it. He shook his head. I don't want to take that risk. And us travelers from another world are the best candidates to help you remove that last layer of insurance. Feng Bujue picked up where Oink left off and shrugged. First, we're just projections. The mirror won't have any permanent influence on us. Second, we're powerful enough. Oink shrugged as well. Initially, I wanted to make use of that Fei Chu Wang, but after a short observation, I realized that the kid's courage and intelligence were lacking. Thankfully, we showed up, right? This was said by Xiaoling. By then, she had also reached the surface. Huh, Oink chuckled drily. In any case, when I saw Feng Bujue, I knew everything was set. While they were talking, the enchantment that shrouded the sky was also undergoing drastic changes. The moonlight, which was not bright to begin with, became even darker and murkier. Since I've helped you so much, why don't you answer 2 more of my questions? Feng Bujue asked Oink after a moment of silence. Ask away. Oink crossed his arms in front of his chest. But I might not answer. Okay. Feng Bujue immediately asked. First question, why did you cause the mutation of the 6E mirror? No comment. Oink decided not to answer the question without thinking. Huh. Feng Bujue's lips curled into a smile. So it's really related to the twilight of the gods. Before Oink's voice even subsided, a subtle change of expression flashed across his face. However, he concealed it well and believed that Oink didn't notice it. Is this your second question? A second later, he maintained his calm tone and asked in return. No. Brother Ju smiled. He purposely responded to Oink's question with a meaningful smile. The second question, no matter what the mirror transforms into in short, will it be a threat to us? Yes, and it's a very big threat. Oink paused before adding, in fact, that's why I'm here to remind you of that. Now that I've delivered my message, I'm sorry, but I won't keep you company any longer. Then, Oink disappeared before everyone's eyes like teleportation. He did not wave his sleeves and did not take away a single cloud. This pig head seems to have mastered some kind of super powerful movement spell. The god of blood's eyes wandered. Not bad. I've seen through that trick of his. I'll explain it to you later. Feng Bujue said as he turned back to glance at the 6E mirror. By then, the mirror had disappeared, and in its place was a twisting pool of blood that was expanding like a mirror. Everyone there, including the god of blood, could clearly feel that the pool of blood was absorbing the energy around it, and energy kept pouring out from within. Then, I think the few of you should leave for now, Brother Ju said as he turned around and walked toward the 6E mirror. If there's no accident, Xiao Tan will be able to finish the scenario soon. But just to be safe, we should try our best not to put ourselves in danger. Ruo, you wanted to ask what he was going to do, but she soon thought of another question. Are you going to jump in? Feng Bujue turned back to smile at her. Don't worry, I'll be fine. Time returned to the present. Somewhere northeast of Lotus Moon Town, another battle of life and death was about to begin. First also Wang, who had thought that he was going to lose, suddenly changed his expression and laughed out loud. The heavens are really helping me. He said this because he was pleasantly surprised to find that the restriction on his skill had been lifted. You seem to... Wang Tanji's expression was cold. Have rekindled the hope of victory. Humph. First Yue Wang waved the sword in his hand. It's not rekindled hope, it's confidence. Such confidence. Xiaodan acutely realized something. Could it be? He glanced at the sky. The restriction on the barrier has disappeared. You're right. First Yue Wang roared and suddenly charged forward. Having recovered all his combat ability, his confidence exploded. He was confident that Xiao Tan was no match for him. So what? Wang Tanji's eyes chilled. The sorcery weapon burning with black flame appeared on his right wrist, and his body blurred instantly. Chi! Who? The next second, there was a gust of wind. The two figures crossed each other, but the sword and blade did not collide. The blade released its power, and the air exploded. The hidden blade released its edge, and the black flame extinguished. The two attacks that should have been evenly matched did not result in a lose-lose result. That was because one of the two was a swordsman and the other was an assassin. No, impossible. First, Yue Wang, who reappeared, lowered his head and looked at the hole on his left chest that was burned by the black flame with shock. His whole body was shaking uncontrollably. I don't know why you would have the misconception that after my skill is restored, I will be able to defeat this person before me. Wang Tanji turned his back to his opponent and said without turning his head, "But I believe. I have used my actions to prove that you are wrong." When Xiao Tan said this rather cool line, first Yue Wang's life points disappeared. The leader of Zombie Blade's first team collapsed to the ground and quickly dissolved into white light. Current quest completed. All main quests completed. You have completed the scenario. Automatic teleportation in 180 seconds. The system announced the completion of the quest and the scenario, as well as the result of the competition. At the time, no one would have thought that first Yue Wang's fall would be seen as a symbol in the near future. In this scene, it was not only one player from Zombie Blade that fell, and it was not only one team, but the entire Zombie Blade studio and many related businesses. After this day, they not only left the stage of tournament for the best S2, but also slowly faded from people's sight and became history. Chapter 997. On the morning of November 9th, the results of the third round of Battle of the Four Worlds were released, and the top 32 of tournament for the best S2 had been decided. After this round, there were three things worth mentioning. First of all, among the remaining 32 teams, only Underworld Frontline and Trash Alliance were not operated by a studio. Considering that the four main members of Loser Alliance were all professional players, Underworld Frontline was the only non-professional team left in the competition. Secondly, in this round, all the teams from Zombie Blade had been eliminated. Although the number of teams they sent out was the largest among all the large studios, in the top 32, they didn't even occupy a single spot. Thirdly, on the morning after the third round of the semifinals ended, Dream Incorporated suddenly announced a surprising piece of news on their official website. Before this announcement was released, most of the people who followed the competition, including Feng Bujue, believed that the finals of tournament for the best S2 would start after the two teams were eliminated from the semifinals. However, this speculation was completely overturned by Dream Company. Based on the official announcement, the second round of tournament for the best S2 Battle of the Four Worlds would end after the top four were decided. The final match, Twilight of the Gods, would be a free-for-all between the four teams. Once this news was released, it created a ripple effect. The strategy of the various gaming studios was instantly disrupted. Originally, they needed to win 4 more rounds to advance to the final round, but now they only needed to win 3 more rounds. The various uncertainties in the finals also multiplied. Therefore, a series of collection, calculation, deduction, and adjustment work appeared out of thin air. Of course, for Feng Bujue and Hong Hu, this sudden change did not bring much pressure. This was because they did not have the support of a gaming studio. In other words, there was not much room for adjustment. No matter how different the competition format was from their expectations, the only thing they could do was to make adjustments before the competition. On November 10th, at 8 a.m., the fourth round of the semifinals was announced. Of the 16 matches in this round, there were 4 matches, and they could be considered the highlight of the competition. First match, Underworld Frontline versus Team 2 of Gods. The reason why this match had become the focus of attention was simple. Everything related to the Underworld Frontline had become the focus of attention. Due to their low-key performance in the preliminaries, Brother Ju and the others' explosive performance in the semifinals was particularly dazzling. In each of the 3 semifinals, they had completely crushed their opponents. Such an achievement was enough to make them publicly recognized as the #1 dark horse. In addition, the Underworld Frontline strength, character, appearance, and so on had also won them quite a bit of popularity. Even though this popularity was mixed with many cultists and Feng Bujue's worshippers, The second match was between Warring States Team 1 and Constellation Team 1. The reason these two teams were the focus of attention was mainly because the information about them was very valuable. As mentioned before, Sengoku Studio was a foreign studio that joined the game after S1. The local players and studios weren't very familiar with their situation. Other than the fact that the main members were all Japanese players, the only thing that could be confirmed at this stage was that Sengoku Team 1 had easily advanced with a perfect record. They were very strong, and their opponent, Constellation Team 1, was needless to say. Even if the normal players did not watch the matches of the munitions factory, the various studios would. Perhaps the current main player in their team would become your main player in the future. Furthermore, Flying Pegasus, the champion of S1, was also in the team. Regarding the mysterious prize that he had received in S1, there were still many rumors. Even though Brother Jew and a few others knew that the prize that he had received could not be used in the game, that was not made public. Therefore, many of the investigators from the studios were still wary of the prize that Brother Jew had received in the previous competition, and they paid close attention to his every move. It was as if it would be abnormal if Brother Jew did not take out one or two items like nuclear bombs or use a skill like Vitality Bomb. Next up was the third match, Hyodai versus Order Team 1. Regardless of whether you believe it or not, in the eyes of the outside world, Hyodai was a strong team that had the potential to defeat Order Team 1. In terms of results, both teams had advanced to the next round with a perfect record, and in the semifinals, they did not give it their all. Even though most people thought that Order Team 1 had a higher chance of winning, they did not think that Hyodai had no chance. But for those who watched the live broadcast of the two teams, they felt that the match would be a stalemate. At least it would not be a one-sided situation. Finally, it was the fourth match, Red Sakura Team 1 vs Order Team 2. In a sense, all of Red Sakura Team 1's matches were focus battles. Su Huaishang's personal popularity did not need to be mentioned. Even her three teammates were extremely skilled female players. Naturally, such a team would not lack spectators at every match. In this round, they met Order Team 2, which was undoubtedly a strong opponent. Out of all the pro teams that had entered the semifinals, only Order and Brahmin were considered to have the strength to win the championship. This was the strength of the best in the industry. Regardless of whether Red Sakura admitted it or not, there was not much of a difference between Order Team 2 and Order Team 1. At the very least, they were on the same level. Therefore, this match could very well be Su Huaishang's curtain call in S2, November 10th, 11:55 p.m., Underworld Frontline Meeting Room. Okay, the deployment for this match. You all understand it, right? Fong Bujua sat at the head of the table, munching on potato chips as he spoke to his teammates with a lazy expression. In the last 20 minutes, he had already explained all the important points to pay attention to in the upcoming match. There was only one reason for him to do so. He had decided to be a substitute for this match. I understand. Misson was the first to respond, but this is already the fourth round of the semifinals. Is it really okay for me to participate? Don't worry, I have my reasons for doing so. Fong Bujue replied with a smile. Even though your mastery level is slightly out of line with your character level, you are still very strong. There is no need to underestimate yourself. He shrugged. Furthermore, it was not easy for you to get away from the mess with Zombie Blade. Shouldn't you take the time to vent? Then, I should thank you for that. And Yuechin narrowed her eyes. But you still haven't told us. How did you deal with that? She paused. To be honest, you did do something illegal, didn't you? Yes, I did. 2 seconds later, Fong Bujue replied in a calm tone. And Yuechin was shocked. You actually admitted it. So be it, Fong Bujue replied. Even if I don't admit it, you all think the same, right? Yes. Xiao Tan immediately nodded in agreement. Ruo Yu and Xiao Ling remained silent and did not comment. In the eyes of spiritual ability users like them, the authority of the law was limited. In fact, even people like Zhang Daod viewed the law from a different perspective than the average person, let alone people like them who possess supernatural powers. As for people like Fong Bujue, before he met Woody, he was already a bit of a sociopath. Now, he was obviously in an even more unscrupulous state. Then, isn't that enough? Feng Bujue said. What do you mean by that? And Yueqin looked at Brother Ju with concern. I don't want the author I'm responsible for to be detained during the company's promotion. Don't worry about that, Brother Ju said. I won't be arrested. Where does your confidence come from? And Yueqin asked. Go home and ask your great-grandfather. Feng Bujue replied, casually with his hands behind his head. Hey, I'm worried about you. What's with that attitude of yours? And Yueqin said angrily. I'm serious. Brother Ju replied. You can go home and ask your great-grandfather, Professor N.C., the founder of Serene Group. He will explain to you why I'm so confident. Chapter 998. At midnight on November 11th, the fourth round of Battle of the Four Worlds started. 32 teams were transported into 16 different scenarios, and they fought each other in pairs. Unsurprisingly, the 4 matches with the highest number of online viewers were the 4 focal battles mentioned in the previous article. However, a quarter of the viewers had moved to another location in less than 10 minutes, game time. This was because Underworld Frontline only used 9 minutes and 15 seconds to kick Team 2 out of the game. This sounded a little unbelievable, but it did happen. There was only one reason for this. The map was too small. Then just how small was this picture? Let's put it this way. This map is called Dust 2, or more precisely, Dust 2 in the Night. This was a map adapted from a classic FPS game, and the whole map was less than 40,000 square meters in size. Other than that, the basic settings of this scenario were as follows. 1. The map itself, i.e., the ground, walls, doors, chests, and other facilities, could not be destroyed. 2. The boundaries of the map, i.e., the square space that formed the map, could not be crossed. 3. The height that the players could reach could not exceed the top of the highest wall of the map. In conclusion, this was a street fight in the dark that was similar to a cage fight. Both parties had to fight within a limited and specific terrain to determine the winner. Under such circumstances, it was obvious who the MVP of this match would be. Therefore, the information that Feng Bujue had analyzed and delivered before the match about the members of Team 2 was rendered useless. In this small map of 40,000 square meters, the Blood Corpse God, who had fear projection and the ability to sense things, was a strategic weapon that dominated all tactics. Under Spirity's suggestion, the Underworld Frontline immediately invited this strongest sixth man out and quickly obtained victory. On the other hand, when the news of Underworld Frontline eliminating Team 2 started to spread, the other main battle had just entered the testing phase. You've got guts. A name is hard to choose, held a sniper rifle, and looked at a figure in the distance. Walking alone in this open area, do you think I'm dead? At that moment, Ming Name was hiding inside a large bird's nest on the cliff. His mission was to monitor the vast, crimson grassland below. As for the guy who was taking a stroll in the open area, he was none other than the vice captain of the First Order Squad, Sashimi. Oh, so it was hidden in that kind of place. Although Sashimi looked like he was taking a stroll in the park, he was actually very nervous. The reason he appeared alone in such an open area was because he wanted to probe the enemy's position. Listening to this voice, it should be hard to choose a name. After using his heavenly hearing ability to locate the enemy, Sashimi continued to move forward quietly. He thought to himself, because the sniping spot is relatively safe and hidden, he subconsciously talks to himself. This is a common bad habit. Bang! Just as he was thinking, a gunshot rang out. Bullets came faster than sound. However, Sashimi was prepared and easily dodged the bullet. This is boundless sniping. Sashimi, who had dodged a few meters away, looked back at the bullet hole on the ground and recalled. What did the analysis report say? It ignores the wind and shooting range, and until it hits the target, its speed and power will not decrease. Bang, 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 bang. In the next second, another 5 almost overlapping sounds were heard, announcing that Ming Ming's second wave of attack had arrived. This time, Sashimi decisively used an item called Speed Scroll and dodged with all his might. As expected, after boundless sniping, he immediately took on the ability of his title, Raging Firepower. Although Sashimi used a one-time use item, he still had a hard time dodging the attacks. Changing the firing interval of a gun to 0, 0, 1, and 1, 5 seconds, and reactivating the previous shooting skill to enter the Raging Firepower state. He was scared just thinking about it. Luckily, I was prepared. Obviously, Sashimi was very familiar with how to choose a name. Otherwise, even if he was prepared, it would have been difficult for him to dodge the 2 attacks without getting hurt. The one who built this advantage for Sashimi was no doubt the powerful organization behind the scenes. Before the start of every match, every member of the orderly team would receive a detailed analysis of the enemy team members. The content of the report was calculated by specialized personnel using the optical computer. Even if it was not 100% accurate, it would not deviate too much. The information that could not be calculated and had an accuracy rate of less than 65% would be specially marked. This was the actual benefit of the pre-match intelligence war. Perhaps many people would scoff at this approach because competition was not mathematics. The essence of competition was the unpredictability of the process and results. However, it was undeniable that these pre-match preparations could affect the outcome of the competition. As long as these actions were within the rules, there was nothing wrong with it. It could even be said that this was part of the strength of the competition. Of course, looking at the format of the tournament for the best, no matter how good the pre-match intelligence work was, it might not be useful in the actual battle. Take the recent match in Underworld Frontline as an example. As long as the team was lucky enough, perhaps due to Brother Ju's absence, they would randomly pick a map that was extremely beneficial to the team. Then, there would be no need for any intelligence support. Phew. At least I dodged it. After Sashimi dodged the second round of attacks, he let out a sigh of relief. Now, I can rest assured. For a player like him who is very steady, there was a reason why he would say something like rest assured. Actually, Sashimi's concern about the name was only because of the 2 skills that he had just used. Since the power of Boundless Snipe would not decrease due to blocking, he could not tank this skill. Similarly, Berserk Firepower, which could strengthen and trigger Boundless Snipe, had to be dodged to deal with it. When these 2 skills entered the cooldown stage, Sashimi had nothing to worry about. This was because his main ability was Sound. This ability could provide all sorts of incredible scouting skills, and another notable effect was that it could provide extremely strong long-range defense. If Brother Ju was here today, he would know that this vice-captain of the first orderly team could ignore most of the long-range attacks that were below grade A with strong sound barrier and low sound zone passive skills. As for normal gunshots, it was as good as nothing to him. He could even tank an RPG within 10 meters. Damn it, I didn't one-shot him. When Hard to Name was reloading, he was already quite annoyed. From the perspective of a marksman, or rather, a sniper's perspective, in such an excellent sniping spot, shooting a target in an open area, and even using his 2 sure-kill combo skills, he was bound to win. Even if he couldn't one-shot the opponent, he should have at least caused some damage, right? The result that he had failed to achieve made him feel quite embarrassed. Forget it, calm down, as long as what? Just as Hard to Name was reloading and aiming again, he was surprised to find that the distance between him and his opponent had shortened by half. Damn it, that's fast. While Hard to Name was shocked, he didn't forget to attack. Are you kidding me? Bang! He cursed and pulled the trigger. This time, he fired a special bullet, Incendiary Bomb. However, this kind of shooting without any skill bonuses was useless to Sashimi. When the bullet was about 10 meters away from Sashimi's head, it was as if it had suddenly been immersed in some kind of extremely dense liquid. It almost completely stopped, and it exploded with minimal power. The spark of the explosion hadn't died down yet, but Sashimi's figure had already escaped from the explosion range. After witnessing this scene, Hard to Name immediately made a very correct decision, which was to run. The 3 attacks earlier had already made Hard to Name realize something. Even though he didn't have time to think things through, his battle instinct had already driven him to react. He is indeed one of Hodei Monarch's people. Hodei Monarch's reputation is not what it used to be, but the time when the hard-to-name trio was more famous has passed. He made a very wise decision before he was forced into a desperate situation. Sashimi sped up and ran toward his opponent as he thought to himself, but it only slightly delayed the time when I catch up to him. Indeed, it was almost impossible to escape from Sashimi's pursuit. If he hadn't been discovered in the beginning, it would have been fine. However, once he was located by his humanoid radar, it would be impossible for him to escape even if he had wings. At this moment, Sashimi had already locked the center of gravity of heavenly hearing on Ming-Name. Ming-Name's voice, footsteps, breathing, and heartbeat. None of them could escape from his hearing. Unless Ming-Name could get rid of Sashimi by more than 2 kilometers in a short period of time, Sashimi would be able to chase him to the end of the world. However, there was one thing that Sashimi did not know, and that was he had fallen into a trap. Moreover, he had fallen for a rather brilliant plan. At the same time, at the other side of the scenario, inside the Red Thorn Forest Valley. Captain, brother drunk, something is wrong. After arriving at the heart of the forest valley, Phantom Dawn sensed something, and his expression turned serious. Since the start of S2, this was the first time he had shown such an expression. What's wrong? Understanding Death, who stood not far away, quickly turned around to ask. This place, no? I should say this entire forest valley. Phantom Dawn said as he looked around. His eyes were wandering. It is all inside a matrix, and this matrix is undeniably a trap set up to target the players. A trap? Lying Drunk, who stood on the other side of him, asked, Who set this up? Of course, it was an NPC, Phantom Dawn replied. When the 3 of us entered the scenario, we rushed here without stopping. Even if Hyodiai's teleportation point is here, they wouldn't have been able to set up such a powerful matrix in less than 20 minutes, right? He paused. Furthermore, how did they know we would come here? Can't you figure out something as simple as that? Suddenly, a voice came from the waterfall behind the 3 players. Before the person who spoke showed himself, the players were already suspicious because the voice sounded like a boy's. Several seconds later, the waterfall was split in half like a water curtain. Then, from the mountain behind it, a small and thin figure slowly walked out. At that moment, Phantom Dawn's eyes glowed. Then, he immediately whispered to his 2 teammates, Be careful. Don't be fooled by this man's appearance. He is a monster from head to toe. You can see through the sequence of truth, right? The boy obviously heard what Phantom Dawn said. As he replied, he walked forward on the water. In that case, you are that Phantom Dawn who swallows the sky, right? Yes, Phantom Dawn replied in a tone that was neither servile nor overbearing. Then, he asked probingly, But I wonder who you are? What did you mean by what you said earlier? The little boy sneered and replied, What I mean is, before he could finish his sentence, another voice suddenly rang out and beat him to it. What he means is, a figure suddenly jumped down from the waterfall and said as he landed, Our Ice Emperor knew that you would come here. Then, the person landed. The person was wearing a light blue uniform with a white background. The Ice Rose badge on his chest had the words Hyodiai printed on it. Based on the feminine presence and the curly hairstyle, who else could it be but a Tobi-sama? Lying Drunk raised his brow. What's going on? Have we really walked into an ambush? But how is that possible? Understanding Death asked darkly. It's very simple. The boy opened his arms and looked at the 3 from Regulation. I have already set up this formation, and I was waiting for you to walk into it. He paused for half a second. Not long ago, when your 2 groups arrived on this planet, I immediately contacted Atobi's group, and that's why they came as well. Huh, that confuses me even more, Lying Drunk said with a smile. Lying Drunk replied with a faint smile. How did you know that we would definitely come here? And who are you? My name is King Dianli. When King Dianli said that, he took a few steps forward. As he walked away, the waterfall behind him slowly closed. The situation that you are involved in today. As he spoke, King Dian Li's eyes scanned the faces of the three from regulation. Is a test that someone has given you. Chapter 999. This month's preview should be the best one to write so far. As you can see, because I went out, ate, drank, played, had fun, last month the progress of the update is a bit late. So the content to be written this month was basically previewed last month. Then, what should I say next? Anyway, let's talk about some news that people like to hear. That is, I plan to be fully present in September and October. Of course, it's still the same sentence. Plans can never keep up with changes. Whether I can be fully present or not, even I don't know, this feeling of unpredictable updates must be very pleasant. Then I'll talk about a more unpleasant topic. At least I'm not very interested in this matter. That is the monthly votes. You all know me. The number of times I talk about this in a year is limited. However, recently, I observed the stars at night, pinch my fingers, and combine with the pattern of previous years to infer. I feel that at the end of this month, the starting point may have double monthly votes. This is a rare opportunity. I hope that this month, students who have monthly votes in hand can hold on a little for me and give it to me at the end of the month. Once you complete this mission, there will be no benefits at all. Was he motivated all of a sudden? Okay, finally, I'll talk a little bit about my personal life. My friends who have followed my account on a certain social media platform should know that the two of us have been planning our wedding recently. I don't know why, but a lot of people seem to think that I'm a person from a well-off family or even a rich second generation. Here, I can tell everyone without joking that I am a poor third generation through and through. Maybe my family could be called a rich family before liberation, but not after the proletariat became the masters. As far as I know, after liberation, my great-grandfather honorably joined the proletariat camp. His family's property was all confiscated, and his money was all gone. His second aunt was too deeply influenced by the old society and was afraid that she would also be confiscated, so she hanged herself. For the next 30 years, the old man had been cleaning houses for the people. He didn't get paid a single cent. Even the brooms and dustpans were bought by himself. From time to time, he had to submit a self-reflection report. No one knew what the self-reflection report was about. Perhaps the government at that time wanted him to understand by himself what it meant that a scholar can be killed or humiliated. So, those friends who think that my family is rich and I don't lack money, you're thinking too much. This doesn't mean that just because I write slower or ask for fewer votes, it means that I don't have to worry about food and clothing. Although I always thought that I had the loftiness and strength of character of a so-called scholar in my heart, there were many times when I had to compromise with reality. For example, right now, regardless of whether I can achieve full attendance or not, I have to write and update as much as possible for the wedding. At certain times, compromising was for the sake of taking responsibility. Men could never graduate from middle school, but men needed to make compromises for the people around them who were worth cherishing. I originally wanted to use the above sentence to end this article, but after thinking about it, wouldn't it be better to add a Vegeta here? Forget it, I'll just go and write the main text. Chapter 1000. It was hard for him to come up with a name. He had been running for 7 to 8 minutes already. While he was running, he did not forget to use all kinds of special ammo to destroy the surrounding terrain to delay his pursuer. However, his efforts did not buy him much time. In the end, Sashimi was only 30 meters behind him in 10 minutes. Ming Ming knew that if he was a few meters closer, his opponent might start to use his skill. If he continued to turn his back to the enemy, he would be attacked first. Therefore, he took out a smoke grenade from his backpack and tossed it to the ground when he thought it was the right time to do so. The thick gray smoke suddenly spread out, covering a radius of more than 10 meters in an instant, and it was still expanding. Has he decided to fight me to the death? Seeing this, Sashimi rushed into the smoke without hesitation and thought to himself, but the smoke bomb basically has no effect on me. Name, low-tone skill card type. Passive skill, permanent skill type. Sorcery effect. When this skill is equipped, a sphere with a radius of 7 for meters with the player, as the center will be considered the low-tone zone. The range of effect of the low-tone zone can be limited by solid walls, such as walls, floors, ceilings, etc. Non-solid attacks and negative effects, such as fire, cold, light, poisonous gas, etc., that enter the low-tone zone will be buffered and eliminated, unless the power exceeds the limit of the low-tone zone. Learning requirement. Sorcery Mastery. Remark. A few years ago, on a weekend night, I went to the superhero bar for a drink. I overheard the bartender say that there was a guy on Earth called the Flash who could shake his body at a high frequency to escape from the ice. At the time, I made a bet with him that if it were me, I could even shatter cement. You all know what happened after that. Yes, I was the shaker who was poisoned by cement. My skill, low-tone zone, can even shatter cement. Even though the remark of this skill seemed to describe a sad story, that was not the main point. The main point was that with the special effect of low-tone zone, Sashimi could move freely in the smoke without a breathing mask. Coupled with his ability to determine position by listening, visual obstacles were almost meaningless. Sure enough, he jumped into the sky. 2 seconds later, Sashimi stopped moving because he had figured out where Minami was going based on the sound of his footsteps and the sound of his body moving through the air. He plans to use the smoke to buy a few seconds of time and then launch an indiscriminate attack from the air with a considerable range and power. After thinking for half a second, a term that he had read in the analysis report popped up in his mind. Ice crystal explosion. That's a good idea, Sashimi thought to himself. Even if you can't kill me in one hit, you can at least apply a debuff on me to gain an advantage in the upcoming battle. Thinking of this, he steadied himself and pointed to the sky without raising his head. What a pity! You won't have the chance to use this move. Buzz. In the next second, an invisible force was released from the tip of Sashimi's finger. Even though he did not use his vision to confirm it, his infrasound finger had accurately hit Minami's torso, causing him to spit out blood and fall to the ground. Not long after, the smoke dissipated. He saw Shinken-sen kneeling on one knee and hurriedly treating his wounds. Sashimi, who was 10 meters away, stood there unscathed. He looked at Shinken-sen with his usual calm eyes and sighed. Although your personal skills are top-notch, your studio's logistics skills are still too weak. He shook his bowl-cut head and said in a regretful tone, "Looking at your reaction, I can tell that your pre-match intelligence collection is not on par with ours." As he spoke, Sashimi took out a silver portable loudspeaker from his inventory and placed it in front of his mouth. "Sorry, see you again." This was undoubtedly Sashimi's must-kill declaration. As soon as he finished his sentence, he opened his mouth and used the special weapon in his hand, Throat Breaker, to activate a sonic attack skill, Roar when the enemy's life is less than 14 points. However, this move didn't end Xiao Ming's life as expected, because don't even think about it. Suddenly, a loud shout was heard. A figure appeared and blocked the path of Sashimi's skill. In that split second, the person had successfully blocked Sashimi's skill with a large shield. He did not even take a step back. How is this possible? Seeing this, Sashimi's habitually expressionless face was filled with shock. He could not help but think to himself, this is a skill enhanced by a special equipment. How can he block it so easily? Whoosh! Just as Sashimi was still in shock, another figure suddenly appeared and hit the back of his head with a stick. Sashimi immediately dodged to the side. However, due to his slow reaction, the tip of the stick still grazed his arm and left a bruise on the outside of his arm. TSK. He's one of the drunken dreams, after all. He can even dodge that. The man with the stick didn't chase after him after his sneak attack failed. He just looked at Sashimi's figure and muttered, "You?" A few seconds later, Sashimi had already dodged to more than 10 meters away. He stood still and looked back at the 3 people. "What did you guys come here?" "Ha! It's so hard to name." Who was holding the large shield stood up and laughed. He then said, "Since you asked so sincerely, then we'll be merciful and answer you. It's so hard to name," tapped the stick on the ground and said, "To prevent the world from being destroyed. To protect the world's peace." The 2 of them spoke one after another. Then, they stopped and turned to look at. It's so hard to name. Mingzi did not answer them, but asked with a strange expression, Hey, I also want to ask, why are you guys here? Didn't you go with Atobi to ambush the other members of Regulation? That was a lie. Oh, Chu replied. The real plan is, Zhun Ge continued, to use you as bait to ambush Sashimi. Huh? Mingzi was shocked. He was stunned for a full 5 seconds before he said, I don't mind being bait, but you should have told me beforehand. Informing you beforehand. Oh, Chu shrugged. There will be a certain amount of risk. Jingu also nodded. Sashimi's surveillance ability allows him to hear voices from very far away. If you accidentally exposed our plan by talking to yourself, then we'll be in trouble. Even if you didn't expose anything in your speech, there will be a difference between knowing your bait and not knowing your bait. Oh, Chu added. For the sake of security, it's better to use the strategy of fooling our own people before fooling the enemy. What the F***CK? Mingzi was shocked. What's going on? What did you guys come up with such a sinister plan? Actually, we didn't plan anything. Oh, Chu replied. Zhungu added. We only found out about it after we entered the scenario. 3 hours before the competition, Feng Buju asked our captain out and fed him a bunch of dirty tricks. On the other hand, in Red Thorn Forest Valley, your problem lies in your overconfidence. Atobi used a rather smug tone to tell the three from Regulation. Since the preliminaries, you know that your every match has been recorded, but you haven't done anything suspicious during the competition. He turned to look at Phantom Dawn. Take you, for example. In the scenario, as long as there was a chance, you would go and kill the time official. Now that we are in the semi-finals, where all the maps will be generated in the main universe, your behavior will become even more obvious. Humph. So what? Phantom Dawn scoffed, and his eyes were filled with arrogance. Even if my data is placed before everyone, who will be able to beat me? Humph. Atobi scoffed as well. He ignored the man and continued. It is because of this obvious behavior that your teammates have fallen into the trap with you. Jean Fugue might have sounded logical, but in reality, most of his dialogue was just repeating Brother Ju's words. Obviously, before the competition started, Brother Ju had already set up a trap both inside and outside the scenario. First, through Billy, at the end of the Ultimate Rescue scenario, he had contacted the Count of Script and King Jian Li, who had been working with him for a long time. At the end of the Scary Nursery rhyme, they had reached an agreement. He had these two bosses who could travel freely in the main universe be prepared when he needed them. Then, using the power of Phantom Church, he set up similar zone-type magic circles in many places in the main universe, ready to be used at any time. Since this kind of magic circle was used to deal with otherworldly travelers, even if the local natives discovered it, they would not have cared. After that, they just had to wait. They had to wait for the first team to meet a strong team in the knockout stage. In the end, the team he waited for was Hyodai. In a way, this was fate. Brother Ju had a good relationship with Jean Fugue. Compared to other big studios, he was more willing to help Hyodai. Therefore, on the day before the 4th round of the semifinals, Feng Bujue solo-queued a few solo scenarios on normal difficulty and successfully established contact with his minions in a scenario set in the main universe. He then started to bribe them. The next day, Brother Ju met with Atobi and told him, I've already set up a trap in the main universe to help you. Then, he gave Hyodai the detailed information of the members of Regulation 1 and 12 well-developed plans. After entering the scenario, Atobi only needed to choose a plan based on the actual situation. After some consideration, Atobi accepted Brother Ju's help. The current him was much more mature compared to when he first entered the game half a year ago. As the boss of a studio and the leader of a team, he could put down his stubborn pride for the benefit of his team. Of course, Atobi was still quite afraid about this because Feng Bujue's 12 plans not only showed that he had done a thorough research on Regulation 1, it also showed that he knew Hyodai like the back of his hand. To cut the long story short, after the two teams entered the scenario, Jianlei immediately established contact with Hyodai's members and informed them of Regulation's plan. Atobi had also chosen a plan based on the situation of Regulation. After Ming-Zi, who was the bait, was sent away, he revealed the real plan and the various weaknesses of the sashimi to Junbro and O.L. Chu. After that, the scene from not too long ago happened. Actually, O.L. Chu and Brother Jun were already on standby in the dark. They understood that it was impossible for Sashimi to be ambushed when he activated his wide-range Tianxing ability. Once he sensed the presence of 3 people, he would retreat immediately. Therefore, O.L. Chu and Brother Jun did not make a move. It was not until Ming-Zi started to run that they tried to make some noise. About 5 minutes later, they confirmed that Sashimi had locked his Tianxing ability onto Ming-Zi. When Sashimi did that, his ability to pick up other sound around him would be lowered to a normal level. At that moment, O.L. Chu and Brother Jun found the chance to get close. With a shield made from vibranium and the advantage of numbers, taking down Sashimi was a sure thing. If there is no accident, your vice captain will be killed soon. In the valley, Atobi was still talking. This match will be our Hyodii taking down the first city. Whatever. Lying drunk rubbed the back of his neck. I don't care what you guys are up to, and I'm too lazy to think about these kinds of traps and tests. He pulled up his sleeves and made a pleased gesture. In any case, if you want to win, talking is not enough. His demeanor radiated the calmness and ease of an expert. Come, let's see if we will die here or you'll be beaten to death by us. Humph, you think too much. Dianlei scoffed coldly and glanced at Atobi. Even if this kid doesn't make a move, the chance of you surviving is close to 0. Ridiculous. When Understanding Death said that, he took out his main weapon from his inventory, 2 spray cans. Do you think you are one of the 4 pillars of divinity? Perhaps I'm not as strong as the 4 pillars of divinity, Dianlei said. However, I'm afraid you aren't as powerful as you think you are in the formation. He paused for a moment. Also, have you forgotten something? Once that was said, the expressions of the 3 from regulation shifted. That's right. The next second, another unfamiliar voice floated out from the forest. Aren't you here to kill me, the officer of time? How could you have forgotten about me? Chapter 1001. As he finished, a rumbling came from the forest. Not long after that, a large shadow walked out from the forest and entered everyone's sight. The monster was about 2 meters tall and had a pair of large bat wings on his back. He had sharp fangs, claws, hooves, and a lion's tail. The strong presence and intimidating aura on his body were undoubtedly the embodiment of his uniqueness data. Samontier. 2 seconds later, Understanding Death recognized the newcomer because he had run into this boss in one of the previous scenarios, but there was no direct confrontation. What's going on? Phantom Dawn turned around, and the light returned to his eyes. You're not time official. I stopped being one a long time ago, Samontier said, but I have a way to make you feel that I am. Phantom Dawn understood what the man meant immediately. You purposely created the realm of time official and let me sense it to lure me here. Very good, Samontier said coldly. You were able to figure that out on your own. That saves me a lot of explaining. Hey, Phantom Dawn, what is the situation now? After another boss-tier monster appeared, Lying Drunk, who was already in his battle stance, felt that something was amiss. So, he turned his head and whispered to his teammate. What's wrong? The situation? Phantom Dawn said with a serious expression. You and the captain will be killed soon, right? Huh. Lying Drunk's lips twitched into a smile. Is that so? As he spoke, he turned his head and gave Understanding Death a meaningful look. With just a glance, Understanding Death understood his teammate's intentions. The next second, the 2 of them charged out at the same speed, and their target was the same, Atobi. The viewers who were watching the match would never have dreamed that they would be able to witness 2 superstars from regulation, one use a sneak attack to attack a small character like Atobi. However, this scene had indeed happened, and it was reasonable. This was because, from the moment Phantom Dawn said the word kill to the moment Lying Drunk exchanged a look with Understanding Death, in less than 5 seconds, These two professional players had already completed the calculation in their minds. First, even though Phantom Dawn sounded unbelievable, he was not joking. Considering the fact that this kid had a 100% accuracy in predicting the outcome of a battle, it was certain that Dienli King and Samontir would be able to defeat Lying Drunk and Understanding Death if they worked together. Secondly, Phantom Dawn only said that you and the captain would die soon, but he did not say that he would die. This proved that, even if his teammates died, he still had confidence that he would survive. Considering the above 2 points, Lying Drunk and Understanding Death thought, since they would definitely die if they fought head-on, they might as well contribute to the team before they died. And what was that contribution? Naturally, it was to kill Atobi. To put it bluntly, they had used 5 seconds to accept the fact that they were dying and reached a consensus on the matter of what else can I do at this moment. The two of them might not be able to defeat the 2 bosses before them, but if they worked together, would they not be able to kill Atobi? With that thought in mind, Lying Drunk and Understanding Death attacked at the same time. At that moment, the two reached Atobi in the blink of an eye. Lying Drunk cut straight to the chase and used the strongest skill in his skill bar, Dragon Fist Burst. Understanding Death did not hold back either and used a pair of spray cans to use a crowd control skill, Graffiti Territory. Of these 2 skills, one was a skill that could kill a player with high defense instantly, and the other was a powerful crowd control skill that combined attack reduction, speed reduction, and armor penetration. Facing this combination of attacks, even if Shiva was there, he would not have survived, much less Atobi. But what happened next shocked Lying Drunk and Understanding Death. Not only them, other than Atobi himself, everyone there, including the viewers who were watching the live stream, were shocked by Atobi's response. On the 10th of November, 9:30 p.m., inside Feng Bujue's conference room, Brother Ju slumped lazily on the main seat of the conference table and finished a long recitation. That's about it. Have you memorized everything? Of course, who do you think I am? Atobi crossed his arms before his chest and sat down on the chair to the left of Brother Ju. He replied matter-of-factly, I can do 20 plans, much less 12. That's good, Brother Ju replied. Then he was reminded of something and changed the topic. Oh, by the way, I have something to remind you of. What is it? Atobi asked. I have a suggestion on the details of the battle plan that I hope you can use. Feng Bujua paused before asking, you have a skill that can only be used once. Ice Mirror Wall, right? What the F***CK? When Atobi heard that, his expression shifted. How did you know that? After he asked that question, he seemed to have come up with an answer in his mind. Did you plan to spy in my studio? Do you think this is a crime movie? Feng Bujua narrowed his eyes. How can there be so many spies in real life? Ignoring the fact that your studio has no value in sending a spy, let's talk about me. I'm not a professional gamer, and I have no conflict of interest with you. So why would I send a spy to work for you? Is it because I'm in love with you? Atobi also narrowed his eyes and used a suspicious gaze to look back at Brother Ju. He was silent. Brother Ju saw his reaction and sighed. My last question was a rhetorical question, not a question. Oh, Atobi sighed in relief. That scared me. He paused for 2 seconds before continuing his previous question. Then, how do you explain the fact that you know about my skill? The fact that I have this skill is only known to the people in our studio. Even the new, outer members of the club don't know about it. About that, Feng Bujue thought about it for a few seconds before replying. It doesn't hurt to tell you. He suddenly asked, You've seen The Matrix, right? I have. Of course, I've seen such a classic movie, Atobi replied. Why would you ask that? Are you trying to change the topic? Feng Bujue ignored him and continued. To put it simply, I'm similar to the main character in the movie. In the game world, I have the power to see through the Matrix code. Huh. Atobi guffawed. Ha ha ha. His laugh was fake. Why don't you say you have superpower in real life? I do. Feng Bujue's expression did not change as he replied calmly. It's just that I haven't fully grasped how to use it. Oh. Atobi nodded. He mimicked Brother Ju and said seriously, To be honest, I suggest you go to a better hospital and see a psychiatrist." To his surprise, Fong Bujue replied calmly, "If it's a psychiatrist, I went to see one when I was in the 5th grade. At the time, I found 2 adults who had information on me to pretend to be my parents and went to the hospital for a full examination and test." At this point, he used both of his hands to make quotation marks. In the end, they gave me a normal report. After a pause of 2 seconds, Fong Bujue chuckled twice. "Haha, but recently, I found out that at the time, I was already being monitored by a mysterious government department. So now, I can't be sure whether the report I received back then had been processed or not." Fine. You win." Atobi held his forehead with one hand and shook his head. "You're a novelist. I can't argue with you. I won't ask anymore. Just think of it as..." He raised his head and used both of his index and middle fingers to make quotation marks, being able to see through matrix codes. Then he brought the topic back on track. "In any case, I do have the skill Icicle Mirror Wall, and it is indeed a consumable skill that will disappear after one use. So what? I just want to tell you," Fong Bujue replied. "No matter which plan you choose in the scenario, once the trap that I've set up takes effect, you, Atobi, will face 2 to 3 members of Regulation 1 with the accompaniment of 2 NPCs. Among them, one of them will be Phantom Dawn, and the other 2, no matter who they are, once they realize that the situation is not in their favor, they will stop at nothing to attack you." He shrugged and continued. "When that happens, even without any analysis, you should understand that the combination of any 2 of drunken, living, dreaming, and death will have the power to kill you instantly." "You mean when that moment arrives?" Atobi followed Brother Ju's train of thought. "I will use Icicle Mirror Wall to counterattack." "No," Fong Bujue denied. "Huh?" Atobi was stunned. "No." Fong Bujue instantly revealed a wicked smile. "When that moment arrives, you should..." Time returned to the present. When the territory of Graffiti and Dragon Fist Burst arrived, Atobi was already prepared. He gripped the ground with both of his hands, and spirit energy gathered around him. As the skill was activated, a silvery white, translucent, giant wall appeared. Name: Icicle Mirror Wall Skill Property. Active skill disappears after one use. Skill type: Sorcery Effect. Create an icicle mirror wall that can last for 5 seconds. All the attacks that the mirror wall receives will be absorbed and converted into pure energy. This energy can be directed at any target within 30 meters according to the user's will. After 5 seconds, the energy that is not released will explode on the spot as the mirror wall disappears. Consumption: 50% of maximum stamina points and sorcery points. Learning requirement: Level 50, Sorcery Mastery B, Fighting B. Remark: this is an ice sorcery created by an unknown master. It provides absolute defense against all skills below Grade S, and it can absorb 70% of the damage from a Grade S skill. If this skill was changed to the permanent mastery version, it would definitely be an S-rank skill. However, Atobi's consumable version had the same effect as the permanent version, but the learning requirement had been lowered. When Atobi used the skill, Dianli Wang and Phantom Dawn had already seen through the skill's effect. They also thought that Atobi would use this skill to counter Lying Drunk and Understanding Death. But Atobi did not do that. In the blink of an eye, Understanding Death skill effect and Lying Drunk's fist landed on the mirror wall. Then, the translucent mirror wall was injected with a ball of colorful energy and a large golden dragon. The two forces intertwined and swirled inside the mirror, and they soon formed a ball of colorful energy. It broke through the ice and headed straight for Phantom Dawn. TSK. Not bad. Honestly speaking, Phantom Dawn was caught off guard by this sudden counterattack from Atobi, and he showed some panic, which was rare for him. However, that was all there was to it. But it's useless against me. Facing the giant energy ball that he could not evade, Phantom Dawn yelled and raised his right arm. Right Hand of Denial. The audience had no idea what kind of skill this Right Hand of Denial was. In fact, if Phantom Dawn did not announce the skill's name, They would not have been able to tell whether it was a skill or not, but they could still see the effect of the skill. When Phantom Dawn used the skill, his arm was covered by a white light. Then he used his right palm to catch the energy ball that was flying at him. This kid, could it be? Seeing this, Sam Montier's expression shifted, and he grumbled internally. Damn it, looks like I've been tricked by Fong Bujue again. Don't tell me he's trying to kill me with a borrowed knife. So that's how it is. No wonder he wants to hunt down the 12 hours. On the other side, Dianli Wang was thinking about something else. Since he has obtained the right hand, it means that he knows about the secret of the left hand as well. If he manages to collect the power of the 12 hours before Ragnarok, things will get out of hand. Tisk, tsk, tsk. After a few seconds of stalemate, the energy ball was like an ice cream ball that was grilled under a spray gun. It dissipated in an instant. Phew! After taking a deep breath, Phantom Dawn's arrogant smile returned to his face. Atobi, is it? I used to think that Hyode Eye's captain was a weakling, but it looks like he is quite capable. Isn't this man a bit too powerful? On Atobi's side, even though he tried his best to act calm on the surface, internally, he was already on the verge of breaking down. The skill that Lying Drunk used to attack me should be Dragon Fist, Burst. Since it is a grade S skill, I took 30% of the damage, and even that 30% took away half of my life points. But the man used one hand to block the energy from the ice mirror wall, and he acted like nothing happened. All right, that's enough warm-ups. Phantom Dawn's voice soon returned, and his eyes moved to Sam Montier. You're the tallest here, so I'll start with you, that you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.